My uncle, flushed with alcohol, echoed words that cut deeper than any knife. His sentiments found harmony in the nods and murmurs of agreement from the other men gathered around. Emboldened by the chorus of support, my husband unleashed a torrent of criticism, each word hitting its mark with precision. His satisfaction gleamed in his eyes as he reveled in the validation of his peers. I forced a calm facade, swallowing my humiliation and rage with each breath. Then, just as tension reached its peak, my mother-in-law rose from her seat, her gaze a force to be reckoned with. "Is that truly all you have to offer?" Her words pierced the heavy air, silencing the room in an instant. "My name is Emma, and I'm a 40-year-old woman working in a medical office. I met Tom, my husband, a man 4 years my senior, through our shared love of tennis. We've been married for 13 years. Though we both longed for children, fate had other plans, leaving a bittersweet ache between us. My in-laws, who live separately, keep a vigilant eye on us, especially my mother-in-law. Our bond is strong. We often enjoy lunches out and shopping trips together. Losing my mother at a young age made my mother-in-law's presence all the more significant. She embraced me with a mother's love, cherishing me as if I were her own flesh and blood. While our marriage initially thrived, over time my husband's demeanor shifted. After about a decade, he became increasingly domineering. His once gentle kindness toward me evaporated. Moreover, his workload burgeoned, leading to frequent overtime and business trips. 3 years ago, he was reassigned to a different department, exacerbating our disconnect. He now spends half the week away from home. Upon his sporadic returns, his demands are curt and dismissive. "Dinner," he barks, or "Is the bath ready yet?" treating me as if I were merely a servant. Fed up, I once dared to voice my grievances. "You're not a child anymore. You should at least handle your own clothes," I protested. His response was chilling. "What nonsense is this? Your role is to obey me as your husband. Don't complain, you're my wife." For what felt like an eternity, my husband's accusatory finger jabbed the air, his voice rising in a crescendo of abuse. This ritual of verbal assault would replay whenever his mood soared, a relentless cycle I couldn't escape. His incessant nagging and troublesome behavior left me no choice but to acquiesce. Sitting at the dinner table one evening, I faced yet another onslaught of criticism. "More vegetables again? Am I supposed to eat like a rabbit now? Get some meat on the table. You know your cholesterol's high." Reluctantly, I resolved to reduce the meat intake. But before I could speak, he rose abruptly, flinging the meal I had prepared onto the floor. "No one knows my body better than me. I'll eat out," I declared, but my words fell on deaf ears as he stormed out, wallet and phone in hand, slamming the door behind him. Every day, I scoured the internet for low-salt, low-meat recipes, desperate to accommodate his high cholesterol flagged in his company's medical checkup. Yet despite my efforts, it all seemed in vain. As I stooped to clean up the mess on the floor, a wave of desolation washed over me. 3 hours later, my husband returned, his tune merry, his senses dulled by alcohol. In resignation, I retrieved his coat from where he carelessly flung it, only to catch a whiff of grilled meat mingled with a perfume unfamiliar to me. Doubts that had lingered in the shadows of my mind surfaced with renewed intensity. I had suspected infidelity in the past, but lacking concrete evidence, I chose to suppress my concerns. Yet the distinct scent of that perfume fueled my suspicions like never before. From then on, whenever my husband's temper flared, he would vanish without explanation, returning home only to rush into the shower. Each time, the telltale fragrance lingered in the air, a haunting reminder that something was amiss. Soon his careless whistling in the shower would be silenced unless I confronted the truth lurking within his coat. Bolstered by my growing conviction of his infidelity, I resolved to gather evidence to confront him. 3 weeks later, on New Year's Day, we made our customary visit to my in-laws' home, where relatives congregated for the annual celebration. The table was adorned with a feast prepared lovingly by my mother-in-law, a colorful array tempting the senses. Amid greetings exchanged and well wishes shared, my husband's discontent simmered just beneath the surface. "Don't hold back, Emma. Dig in," my mother-in-law encouraged, to which I gratefully replied. Yet my husband's gaze bored into me with disapproval as I savored the meal, appreciating the effort put forth by his mother. "Where are the chopsticks?" His voice pierced the air, breaking the harmony of the gathering. Hastily, I fetched them from the kitchen, presented them to him, only to be met with another demand. "And the cups?" he queried, his irritation palpable. Shouldn't she anticipate these things without being asked? You need to be more attentive to your surroundings, he chided, his words like barbs aimed at my every move. Despite the presence of our extended family, my husband's verbal assaults persisted. I'm not a mind reader. You have to communicate with me, he insisted, his tone cutting through the festive atmosphere. Suppressing my frustration, I handed him a glass, which he accepted with a charming smile as he sipped the sake poured by our relatives. Would you care for a drink, Emma? My uncle kindly offered, but my husband interjected, she's on chauffeur duty today, dismissing the gesture. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and the other women toiled away in the kitchen, preparing lunch and attending to the needs of the men. Donning an apron I brought from home, I joined the flurry of activity, working tirelessly alongside them, while my father-in-law and the other men reveled in their merriment, consuming one bottle of sake after another. The sounds of their boisterous laughter filled the air. Expressing her sympathy for our busyness, my mother-in-law interrupted our tasks to offer us a respite, serving steaming cups of tea. As we sat together, engaging in light conversation, my husband's voice echoed from the living room, a reminder of the tensions simmering just beyond our temporary sanctuary. Let's spice things up with some honesty, shall we? A little stress relief for the new year, my husband proposed to the delight of the gathered guests. The loser of a round of rock, paper, scissors gets to spill the beans, he declared, his words slurred from alcohol. That sounds like a riot, my mother-in-law chimed in, her interest piqued. Little did she know, I had my own agenda for this New Year's Eve gathering. As the game commenced with enthusiastic shouts, I seized the opportunity presented by my husband's unexpected suggestion. Retrieving something from my bag, I discreetly tucked it into my apron pocket. Amidst the raucous game, the losers vented their frustrations about work and bosses, met with sympathetic nods and murmurs of agreement. It's all too true, the chorus of listeners echoed. Finally, it was my husband's turn to air his grievances, having lost the game of rock, paper, scissors. Anticipation and anxiety knotted in my stomach as I awaited his revelations. My complaint is that my wife lacks attractiveness, and her cooking leaves much to be desired. My husband's words struck me like a bolt of lightning, leaving me reeling in shock. My father-in-law, clearly uncomfortable, hastily cleared his throat. But when you two tied the knot, you couldn't stop praising her beauty and culinary skills, he interjected, attempting to diffuse the tension. That was ages ago, Dad. Nowadays, she serves up bland dishes filled with nothing but leaves like rabbit food. My uncle's demeanor darkened at the revelation. It's unacceptable. As his wife, she should step up her game. His sentiments found resonance among the men present. Unbeknownst to them, I had dedicated countless hours pondering my husband's health and meticulously planning our meals. Yet their words flowed freely, oblivious to my efforts. Overwhelmed by a cocktail of embarrassment and fury, I longed to escape. As the conversation shifted to complaints about wives, my husband led the charge. I toil away every day, yet my allowance remains unchanged. Stop your griping and obey me, my father-in-law chuckled in agreement, while the wives, downtrodden, remained silent. Then it was my husband's turn once more. Everyone else is blessed with children, he declared, but my wife is defective, incapable of bearing offspring. His callous words pierced me to the core, shattering the illusion of our marriage. The ache of unfulfilled dreams and the sting of betrayal weighed heavy on my heart, drowning me in a sea of sorrow and frustration. I inhaled deeply, willing the tears threatening to spill over to retreat. It'll all work out, Emma. My mother-in-law's gentle grip on my hand offered a modicum of comfort. With a heavy sigh, she rose from her seat, her countenance dark with a resolve I hadn't witnessed before. Is that all you've got to say? Her unexpected outburst jolted the men, accustomed to her usual gentle demeanor. The once vibrant atmosphere fell into an uneasy silence. Come on now, let's not ruin the fun, my father-in-law attempted to diffuse the tension, addressing my mother-in-law. Fun? Are you the only ones enjoying yourselves here? You should have put a stop to this. My mother-in-law's voice trembled with righteous indignation. Shame on you, speaking to her like that, labeling her defective. How dare you? She continued, her gaze piercing. Yes, she's right. My father-in-law's troubled expression betrayed his discomfort as he averted his eyes. We all have grievances to air, he conceded. Exactly. The women, previously silent, erupted in support, their applause ringing through the room. Let's not hold back. Speak your mind, and we'll all feel better. The words of my mother-in-law ignited a cascade of truth from the women, each expressing their grievances with newfound courage. If you want more allowance, then earn more. Why not take initiative instead of expecting us to cater to your every need? They demanded, their voices ringing with determination. As the wives confronted their husbands with precise criticisms, the men faltered, offering apologies in succession. Only my husband remained unmoved, his indifference palpable. "Why should I apologize for speaking the truth?" he retorted, locking eyes with Noah in a tense exchange. "I refuse to apologize, and I'll say it again. She's unattractive, a terrible cook, and incapable of bearing children." My husband's accusatory finger pointed squarely at me, each word a dagger to my heart. The dam of sorrow and frustration I had meticulously held in check finally burst, giving way to a tidal wave of rage. "You have no right to speak to me like that," I confronted my husband with a measured tone, my hand discreetly gripping the cell phone hidden in my apron pocket. "It's unfair that you're the only one allowed to vent. I have grievances too, you know, and you wouldn't object, would you? You've aired your complaints about me plenty of times. I'd welcome appreciation, but not baseless accusations." With a deliberate motion, I withdrew an envelope from my pocket, scattering its contents across the table where our relatives sat. The photographs revealed damning evidence: my husband entering a hotel room with another woman, then exiting her apartment, hand in hand. Bolstered by my suspicions, I had discreetly installed a GPS tracker in his car, providing irrefutable proof of his infidelity. Originally intended for a private discussion with my mother-in-law, the situation demanded immediate action. Guests filled the room as the truth unfolded, disrupting the once jovial atmosphere. Frantically, my husband attempted to gather the incriminating photos. "Isn't it normal for husbands to stray?" He appealed to the men for validation, but his plea fell on deaf ears. No one in the room offered agreement, leaving him isolated in his deceit. As my uncle, once a supporter of my husband, denounced infidelity with a resounding "No, that's unforgivable," the other men nodded in solemn agreement. Yet my husband remained defiant. "You lot couldn't even dare to stray from your wives," he taunted, his laughter hollow and bitter. My uncle, spurred into action by my husband's audacity, rose from his seat. "Who truly bears the shame here?" he challenged, echoed by murmurs of concurrence from the men, their gazes piercing through my husband's facade. Despite his attempts to maintain a facade of strength and righteousness, my husband's demeanor reeked of desperation, leaving me repulsed by his arrogance. With resolve, I confronted him once more, armed with further evidence. "A week ago, I received a call from Maruka-san, your newfound love," I revealed, each word laden with the weight of betrayal. "She claimed you've been seeing each other for 3 years now." My husband's feeble attempts at denial only served to betray his guilt. "She even mentioned your subordinate, and the fact that she's 7 months pregnant," I continued, unmasking the deceit woven into his web of lies. "She pleaded for a divorce, stating that you refused to acknowledge the child." Fearing my reaction, his protests dissolved into stammered excuses as I extracted my phone from my apron pocket, placing it on speaker for all to hear. "Maruka-san, did you hear what I just said?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Through stifled sobs, her response came quietly but unmistakably. "Yes," she confirmed, her words carrying the weight of truth, shattering the illusion my husband had meticulously constructed. In fact, the day before New Year's, I had reached out to the girl, informing her of my intentions to call her the next day. Seeking insight into my husband's true intentions, she had agreed, and thus, I made the call just before confronting him. Overhearing the conversation, she was overcome with tears and fury. "He told me to wait until our divorce is finalized," she lamented, her voice trembling with betrayal. "I never uttered such words. Surely, as my wife, you understand, don't you? Why would I say such a thing?" "You're the one who betrayed me," my husband countered, his gaze falling to the ground in shame. "I'll never forgive you," she declared before abruptly ending the call, her trust in my husband shattered. Presenting the divorce papers I had prepared, I demanded his signature, only to be met with a storm of fury. "Absolutely not. I can't simply sign this on a whim." "How dare you, sis? Besides, after all this, you'll owe me 2 million yen in alimony." "No, I refuse to divorce you. I simply don't have that kind of money," he protested, his demeanor devolving into childish petulance as he stamped his feet in protest. Witnessing my husband's unprecedented display of immaturity, I nearly chuckled, but remained resolute in my demand for divorce and alimony. Tom, you're not a child. It's shameful. My mother-in-law's frustration with his pitiful behavior was evident as she scolded him with an exasperated expression. You can't just refuse divorce and alimony. Face reality with dignity, I pressed on, my tone unwavering. It's not that simple, Mom. Dad, you understand how I feel, right? My husband appealed, seeking validation. Absolutely not. I can't condone your actions. My father-in-law's response was firm, leaving my husband with little recourse. Reluctantly, he signed the divorce papers and agreed to the alimony, his tears held back only by sheer willpower. Believing this gathering to be the opportune moment to expose my husband's infidelity, I pushed him further. Oh, by the way, I've terminated our lease at the end of the month. One home should suffice for you, shouldn't it? My words were met with applause from the women and deep sighs from the men, and my husband left my in-laws' house, seemingly fleeing from the attention of everyone present. The next day, they filed for divorce at the city office and relocated to a rental apartment I had already arranged. Additionally, I sought 1.5 million yen in alimony from my ex-husband's unfaithful partner. It would have been a harsh blow for the girl, having quit her job upon learning of her pregnancy. But forgiveness was out of the question. After losing his apartment, my ex-husband sought refuge with the girl. Promptly, he acknowledged paternity upon divorce. However, she eventually severed ties, demanding 1.5 million yen per month in child support. Moreover, my ex-husband resigned from his job following the scandal's exposure, making it untenable for him to continue with the company. Left abandoned by his parents and unable to secure a new job, my ex-husband resorted to sleeping in internet cafes and juggling part-time gigs to meet his alimony obligations. Susan, my former mother-in-law, confided in me about his deteriorating health, citing elevated cholesterol levels and the toll his self-indulgent lifestyle had taken since our divorce. Interestingly, Susan and I forged an unexpected friendship post-divorce, growing closer than ever before. Now I find solace in the tranquility of my life, relishing the peace that comes with solitude.
The manila envelope sat like a ticking bomb on my kitchen counter. My name scrawled across it in unfamiliar handwriting. I stared at it, my morning coffee growing cold in my hands. "Aren't you going to open it?" My husband Eric's voice snapped me out of my daze. I shook my head. "I don't know what it is. Could be one of those chain letters or something." Eric rolled his eyes and slit the envelope open with his car key before I could protest. He pulled out a single sheet of paper and scanned it, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "Honey, you need to read this." His voice was barely above a whisper. The paper shook in my hands as I read through the anonymous typed message. "Miss Leela Porter, your life is not what you believe it to be. The comfortable existence you've built was founded on lies spun by the ones you loved and trusted most. If you wish to uncover the truth, you must delve into your mother Marianne's past. Her untimely death was no accident." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Mom couldn't be gone? We had been estranged for several years, but I always expected her to reach out again eventually, to explain why she cut off all contact after. The letter slipped from my grasp, fluttering to the floor. My knees buckled and I crumpled into a kitchen chair, sobs racking my body. Lila? Eric was crouched before me, gripping my shoulders. "What is this about? Who sent that letter?" I choked back my tears, struggling to find the words. "My mom? She's dead. And this psycho says it wasn't an accident." Eric's eyes went wide with alarm. We both knew my strained relationship with my mom was a touchy subject I avoided at all costs. "Are you sure it's legit?" he asked gently. "Maybe it's just someone messing with you?" I shook my head vehemently. "No, it has to be real. I can feel it." My mom had enough skeletons in her closet to make a letter like this alarmingly plausible. Eric squeezed my hand. "Okay, let's not jump to conclusions just yet. We'll get to the bottom of this." The rest of the day passed in a blur. I called the Monmouth County Police repeatedly until an annoyed operator finally confirmed my mother had died 2 weeks prior in a house fire. The blunt way she relayed the information over the phone made it that much more gut-wrenching. By nightfall, I felt numb, empty, as if someone had carved out a piece of my soul, leaving a raw, gaping wound. I barely registered Eric heating up a frozen dinner and joining me on the couch with 2 glasses of wine. "I'm so sorry, honey," he murmured, wrapping an arm around me. His embrace was stifling rather than comforting. I pulled away, unable to process his pity. My mind raced with fragmented memories of Mom, the rare weekends she was allowed to take me to the shore after her bitter divorce from my dad. Her forced smiles as she introduced me to her new husband Patrick at our rundown apartment complex. The stream of disappointments and broken promises that eventually made me stop reaching out. Tears burned at my eyes again as one persistent thought echoed through my mind. I never truly knew my own mother. And now, thanks to this cruelly anonymous letter, I realized I may have missed my only chance to uncover her buried secrets. No, I couldn't accept that. If this letter spoke the truth, Mom's death wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of me finding the answers she never gave. I drained my wine glass and met Eric's concerned gaze with newfound determination blazing in my eyes. I need to find out what really happened to my mother, and I'm not going to stop until I uncover every last lie she was hiding. The next morning, I called in sick to Milburn High and arranged for a substitute teacher to cover my English classes. This search for the truth about my mother's life and death took priority over everything. After downing 3 cups of strong black coffee, I was buzzing with anxious energy. I pulled the tattered box of Mom's belongings out of the hall closet where it had sat gathering dust for years. The worn cardboard collapsed as I tore off the seal of packing tape, spilling its contents across the living room floor in a jumble. Rifling through the scattered items, a leather-bound journal caught my eye. Faded and warped from water damage, it nonetheless seemed to call to me with a sense of importance. This had to be the secret diary mentioned in the letter. My hands shook as I carefully opened the cover, bracing myself for whatever secrets Mom had committed to those pages. The first few entries were fairly banal, descriptions of her work at the daycare center, musings about her latest craft projects, scattered comments about missing her baby girl. Flipping ahead, the tone grew darker and more urgent. August 19th, Patrick's moods have swung again. He came home late from yet another business trip and started raging about money troubles. Claims he's playing catch-up from being short on his latest investment. But we both know his risky business ventures are covering up something more nefarious. My breath caught in my throat as I continued reading. Over the next few weeks, Mom's journal entries painted Patrick, her second husband, as an utterly monstrous individual. Each page revealed more disturbing accusations: infidelity, illegal money laundering, physical abuse, and implied threats if Mom ever spoke up. By the time Eric arrived home from his IT job that evening, I sat amid the scattered wreckage of Mom's belongings, journal in hand and face streaked with tears. He pulled me into a crushing hug. "Lila, what's going on? Please talk to me." I handed him the journal without a word. I watched his expression morph from concern to outright horror as he absorbed Mom's words and gathered the depths of Patrick's depravity. "That bastard," Eric growled after finishing the last entry. "I knew your stepdad was shady, but nothing like this." "We have to go to the police," I said with a fierce determination. The secrets in that journal proved Mom's death was no accident. Patrick had to pay for his sins. Eric shook his head somberly. "There's no hard evidence, just your mom's writing. The cops won't take that seriously enough to move on Patrick." My shoulders sagged in defeat. He was right, of course. We needed more concrete proof. "Then we find it," I stated bluntly. "We hire a private investigator or something. I don't care if I have to burn through every penny of my savings to expose Patrick. He's not getting away with this." Eric opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off with a stern glare. When he saw the intense fire burning behind my eyes, he simply nodded in resignation. That night, I scoured the internet for any private investigators or agencies that could aid my quest for the truth. An ad for a local Jersey firm called Granite 6 Solutions caught my eye. Their bold tagline, "No stones left unturned," resonated with my inner turmoil. I filled out their online contact form with trembling fingers. "Need to hire your services immediately. Suspect foul play regarding a recent house fire and death of a family member. Willing to pay top dollar for skilled investigator. Life depends on exposing the truth. Please contact at earliest convenience." After clicking send, an ominous sense of finality washed over me. There was no turning back now. I was forging a path toward justice for Mom, or outright vengeance against the man who destroyed her life. Only one of two outcomes would emerge. Either I would expose Patrick's vile transgressions and bring him to answer for his unforgivable crimes, or he would succeed in burying the full truth along with my mother's battered corpse. The latter was unacceptable. Tugging the quilt tighter around my shoulders, I clenched my jaw and settled in for a sleepless night. A war was about to begin, whether Patrick realized it yet or not, and I had no intention of showing mercy to the enemy. 2 days later, I stared apprehensively at the peeling green paint of the dilapidated house number 627. This run-down bungalow had been the address listed for Ray Porter in the private investigator's preliminary findings. My dad, a man I had willfully cut out of my life almost 2 decades ago. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening. Could I really go through with this? Dredge up old family wounds and somehow convince Dad to divulge what he knew about Mom's death? Before I could overthink it, I killed the engine and strode up the cracked front walk, each step fueled by a burning determination. I had to see this through, for Mom's sake. A petite woman with salt and pepper curls answered my sharp rap at the door. Her warm smile dissolved into confusion as she took me in. "Can I help you, dear?" I'm looking for Ray Porter," I stammered. "This is his address, right?" Understanding flickered across her face. "Oh, you must be Lila. Come on in, honey." She ushered me inside, down a narrow hall to a small living room. Faded family photos covered nearly every inch of wall space. "Ray, look who's here," she called out. Heavy footsteps approached, and then he was there. My father. I'd recognize those same sorrowful green eyes anywhere, lined now with age but still sparkling with the same gentle spirit I remembered from childhood. "Lila?" He whispered my name like a prayer, drinking in every feature of my face as if I were a mirage that could disappear any second. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Tears burned in my eyes, blurring my vision of this once familiar man, who was now an utter stranger. Ray's face crumpled, and he pulled me into a fierce embrace, clinging to me like a shipwreck victim grabbing a life preserver. I froze, utterly disoriented, before melting into his paternal warmth and dissolving into heaving sobs against his plaid flannel shoulder. We stayed locked like that for what felt like an eternity. All the resentment, anger, and ingrained betrayal I'd harbored for years toward my father crumbled to ashes in that moment. A dam of emotions I didn't even realize I had bottled up burst open with unstoppable force. Finally, Ray pulled back, his own eyes rimmed with tears. "Eva, can you give us a minute?" The woman, his new partner, I gathered, smiled kindly and gave my shoulder an affectionate squeeze as she exited to the kitchen. Ray steered me to a tattered plaid couch and handed me a box of tissues from the battered coffee table. "Tell me why you're here, Lila. Whatever the reason, I'm so grateful to see your face again." I dabbed at my eyes, struggling to find my voice. "It's about Mom." The words caught in my throat. Ray's expression shifted, a muscle tightening in his weathered jaw. "I never thought I'd live to see the day when you came around asking about Marianne," he said, in a low, measured tone, "especially after you shut me out for good when you hit 18. Pain lanced through my gut. His subtle rebuke stung with the truth. "I know, and I'm sorry, Dad. I was so angry and messed up after you and Mom divorced. I took everything out on you, instead of trying to understand." Ray waved off my apology with a calloused hand. "Water under the bridge, kiddo. Maybe we'll get a chance to rehash all that another time. For now, why don't you tell me what's going on with your mother? I've got to admit I haven't heard a peep from her in years." My heart clenched as I realized he had no idea of the tragedy that befell Mom. A fresh wave of sorrow slammed into me as I choked out the words. "Dad, Mom died. A house fire, just a couple weeks ago. And I think there's reason to believe it wasn't an accident." Ray froze, the blood draining from his face as the weight of my revelation crashed over him. A low, keening sound of pure grief escaped his lips. "No," he whispered, burying his head in his hands. "After all these years, not like this." I instinctively reached out and grasped his shoulder, our roles reversing as I now provided strength and comfort to my shattered father. As his sobs echoed through the living room, I clenched my jaw, a renewed sense of purpose coursing through me. If exposing the truth about Mom's death brought this much pain to my kind-hearted father, then her killer deserved to suffer 1,000,000 times worse. And there was only one man who could possibly be responsible, Mom's husband Patrick. It was time to make that snake pay for his unforgivable crimes, no matter what it took. After leaving Dad's place, my head spun with fragmented memories and newfound determination. He had filled in some of the gaps about his bitter split from Mom, confirming my suspicions that Patrick's controlling behavior played a major role in tearing my family apart. Though gutted by the news of Marianne's death, there was a flicker of hope in Ray's eyes when I vowed to make Patrick pay for any wrongdoing, as if part of him still clung to the belief that justice could be served after all these years. I couldn't let him down, not again. My mistakes as a confused, resentful teenager had already cost me too much time with my father. This time I would be the mature, take-charge woman Mom had raised me to be. When I pulled into our driveway, Eric was waiting on the porch, poring over a manila file. He looked up expectantly as I killed the engine. "You'll never guess who called me today." I arched an eyebrow. "Who?" "Nate Edwards, the private investigator from Granite 6 Solutions." My eyes widened. I had nearly forgotten reaching out to them after discovering Mom's disturbing journal entries. Eric rose and crossed the lawn, handing me the file. "Looks like the guy started digging already, even before we officially hired his firm. That's initiative, I guess." I flipped through the contents, pages of photocopied documents, phone records, even some grainy surveillance footage. Nate had managed to unearth a staggering amount about Patrick's personal life and business dealings, multiple banking transfers linked to offshore accounts in Belize, bank statements flagging numerous large cash withdrawals, damning evidence of Patrick's illicit money laundering and embezzlement schemes. "Son of a bitch," Eric breathed over my shoulder, scanning the paperwork with me. "Your scumbag stepfather has been laundering money for years. Probably got his hands in all sorts of organized crime rings." My stomach turned at the realization. I had suspected Patrick of indulging in shady business practices based on Mom's diary, but the sheer scope of his criminal activities was staggering. He had been building a veritable empire of corruption, and now a prime target painted on his back for anyone he'd wronged along the way seeking revenge. I turned to Eric, a chilling sense of clarity washing over me. "We need to hire this guy, Nate. If he's already digging this deep on his own, just imagine what he could uncover with full resources behind him." Eric nodded grimly. "Consider it done. I'll make the call in the morning and get him on full retainer, whatever it takes." The next day, the doorbell rang promptly at 9 a.m. It was like the private investigator could sense my desperation. I flung open the door to reveal a trim, sandy-haired man in his late 30s. His eyes were keen and assessing as he gave me a quick once-over. "Lila Porter?" His voice was a low baritone, laced with a subtle Jersey accent. Added, "And you must be Nate Edwards. Please come in." I led him to the living room where Eric already had a pot of coffee going. After we all settled in with our mugs, Nate pulled out his file and spread out the documents and photos on the coffee table. "First off, I need to express my deepest condolences about your mother, Mrs. Porter. Her death, well, based on my preliminary findings, it seems highly unlikely to have been an accident." He launched into a methodical recounting of his discoveries so far, Patrick's money trails, his likely involvement with local organized crime, even some security footage capturing him meeting with known mob enforcers behind a Henderson diner. Cold anger surged through me with every unforgivable revelation. "We have reason to believe the fire that killed your mother was a premeditated hit, ordered by one of your stepfather's associates to tie up loose ends," Nate stated grimly. White-hot rage seethed within me. I could practically smell the bitter tang of smoke, hear the crackle of insatiable flames devouring all traces of Mom. Eric squeezed my hand, pulling me back from that dark abyss of fury. I took a steadying breath and met Nate's gaze, my own eyes burning with resolve. "So, what's our next move? How do we take down this sick, twisted bastard before he destroys anyone else's family?" For the first time, the faintest hint of a smile tugged at the corner of Nate's mouth, a look of pure feral satisfaction. "Don't worry, Mrs. Porter. By the time I'm through, Patrick Logan won't be able to so much as sneeze without us having a paper trail to bury him for life." He spread his palms out over the damning dossier, eagerly awaiting my go-ahead. I didn't hesitate. "Let's burn this evil son of a bitch to the ground." Over the next few weeks, Nate and his team at Granite 6 Solutions worked tirelessly to uncover every seedy detail of Patrick's criminal empire. Bank accounts, properties, safe houses, known associates, nothing was left unturned. I marveled at the investigators' meticulous tenacity. Nate practically moved into our spare bedroom, subsisting solely on pizza and Eric's industrial-strength coffee as he pored over files and surveillance footage deep into the night. Meanwhile, I channeled every ounce of my energy into putting on a mask of nonchalance around Patrick. A few times per week, I forced myself to endure his company at family dinners or gatherings, all while fighting the urge to go scorched earth and expose him as the venomous snake he truly was. One sunny Saturday in late April, Patrick insisted we all gather at his ostentatious McMansion in Westfield for an outdoor family barbecue. Code for him lording his wealth and status over everyone. When Eric and I arrived, trays of hamburger patties and hot dogs sizzled on an eye-wateringly expensive stainless steel grill that could feed an army battalion. Of course, Patrick had to spare no expense at displaying his money, even for the pettiest of events. "Lila! So good to see you, dear." Patrick released a noxious cloud of cigar smoke as he pulled me in for a loose, unwelcome embrace with his meaty arms. I struggled not to recoil from his thick musk of aged whiskey and hubris. Putting on my best media-trained smile, I extricated myself from his grasp. "It's great to see you too, Patrick. Your, mother would have loved a little shindig like this, you know." He flashed a toothy grin that didn't reach his dull gray eyes. "We should raise a glass in her honor." While Patrick busied himself pouring scotch from an obnoxiously ornate crystal decanter, I fought the urge to vomit. How dare he exploit Mom's memory like that, as if he hadn't just had her brutally murdered? I couldn't white-knuckle it much longer. The searing hatred brewing in my gut threatened to erupt with every pompous word that dribbled from Patrick's thin, deceptive lips. He passed around the tumblers of scotch, amber liquid sloshing carelessly onto the patio bricks. When he pressed one into my hand, I saw red. "Actually, you diabolical pig." The words escaped in a vicious snarl before I could rein them in. Patrick paused, the self-satisfied smile sliding off his puffy face as he registered my tone. "I'm sorry, what did you call me?" "You heard me, you twisted monster." My whole body trembled with pent-up rage. "I know what you did to my mother. I know about all your sick, criminal dealings." Patrick froze, the hand gripping his scotch glass twitching almost imperceptibly. For a fleeting second, the bravado cracked, and something akin to fear flickered across his bloated features. But he recovered quickly, squaring his shoulders in an attempt to regain control. "Now, Lila, I don't know what kind of insane ideas you've been getting, but I suggest you watch your tone when speaking to me." His nostrils flared as he tried to loom over me with his imposing stature. I was utterly unfazed. Having endured years of his menacing bravado toward my mother, I now saw Patrick for the sniveling coward he was underneath the expensive suits and blustering ego. "Yeah, that macho posturing may have worked on Mom, but it won't fly with me, slime ball." I jutted my chin out defiantly. "I'm going to take you down and make sure you rot behind bars for the rest of your pathetic life for what you did to her." Patrick's meaty face flushed a mottled crimson, his lips twisting into an ugly sneer. For a wild moment I thought he might lash out and strike me down where I stood. But then his gaze landed on something over my shoulder, and the blazing rage snuffed out in his eyes, replaced swiftly by a mask of false geniality. Well, I didn't realize we had more guests arriving." His tone dripped with forced joviality as he slapped on a plastic smile. "Come on over and join the party." My blood turned to ice in my veins as I whirled around. Striding across the immaculately landscaped lawn was Nate Edwards, flanked on either side by two grim-faced men whom I instantly pegged as federal agents from their rigid posture. Of course, Nate must have called for reinforcements from the FBI the second he detected my confrontation brewing. Patrick glowered at me for a split second before throwing back the contents of his scotch glass with a mirthless smirk. "Your boy toy's got some brass ones, I'll give him that." I didn't deign to respond, keeping my gaze locked on Nate. A stormy sense of vindication surged through me as the investigators moved in to slap the cuffs on my stepfather's wrists. The reign of terror was over. Patrick's karmic retribution had finally arrived. Justice would soon be served. one way or another. Outside Patrick's palatial home, federal agents swarmed like locusts while a local news van idled on the curb. Crimson lights flickered across the meticulously manicured shrubbery as the reporters jostled for position behind the police barricades. Inside the marbled foyer, Patrick strained against the handcuffs secured too tightly around his thick wrists. Rivulets of sweat streamed down his flushed face as he attempted to maintain some semblance of dignity. "You arrogant bitch!" His veneer of composure cracked as he rounded on me with rabid fury. "How dare you orchestrate this spectacle in my own home?" I remained stone-faced, secure in the knowledge that his bloated ego was about to receive the brutal comeuppance it deserved. "You have no one to blame but yourself, Patrick. This is merely the consequence of your decades of criminal atrocities finally catching up to you." He scoffed, shoulders heaving with rage. "As if any of your paltry allegations will stick, I'll have my legal team eviscerate this nice little storyline you've tried to fabricate." "Is that so?" Nate's low baritone cut through the tension like a scalpel. The private investigator stepped forward, brandishing a computer tablet loaded with video files and documents amassed over weeks of painstaking surveillance work. With a few deft taps, he pulled up grainy security footage of Patrick meeting with several known mob associates behind a seedy diner. The timestamp confirmed it was from earlier that same week. "Take a good look at this, Mr. Logan," Nate said, his voice dripping with cold malice. "This is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the incriminating evidence my team has compiled." Patrick's veneer of bravado slipped further as he squinted at the screen, realization sinking in through his fury-induced haze. Sweat began beading on his brow as flashes of other recordings cycled past. Him delivering bricks of cash to hulking enforcers, illegally purchased firearms changing hands, even his hulking frame hunched in a sleazy motel room with a woman half his age who definitely wasn't his wife. "Son of a bitch." His gravelly muttering barely rose above a whisper. His shoulders slumped in resignation, as if all the hot air had finally escaped his overinflated ego. In that moment, I pitied him, this wretched, hollow shell of a human who had once held such fear and power over me, now rendered utterly powerless and pathetic in the face of his own vile misdeeds. The front doors burst open, and a whirlwind of law enforcement swarmed inside, spreading through the opulent marble corridors to begin hauling out boxes of evidence and seized property. Their meaty hands gripped everything from garish modern art pieces to hollowed-out books stuffed with stacks of illicit cash. Amid the chaos, one grizzled FBI agent marched up to Patrick and leaned in close, his nicotine-stained teeth gnashing as he spoke in a guttural snarl. "We've got enough on you to lock you away for multiple life sentences, sleazeball. Though from the looks of it, turning state's witness against your mob associates is the only way you'll avoid getting that big gut of yours ventilated on some prison yard." Patrick's Adam's apple bobbed as a shudder rippled through him. "Tell us everything you know," the agent pressed with a menacing glare. "Starting with what happened to the wife's remains after the arson job." "My mother's remains?" An icy chill gripped my heart before molten rage returned to scorch my veins. So the depravity knew no bounds with this degenerate scum. He had taken Mom from this world in an agonizing inferno, and then desecrated what was left of her mortal shell. I clung to Eric's arm, unable to trust my knees to support my weight against the crushing gravity of this fresh horror. Hot, furious tears blurred my vision as Patrick opened his mouth to begin confessing his unthinkable sins. A part of me knew I should turn away, spare myself from ingesting any more malignant, soul-shriveling revelations about the man I had inexplicably once called family. Let the lawman handle extracting every last filthy detail. But something in me remained transfixed, morbidly hungering to consume every wretched word of truth that might finally release me from the darkness of deception I had been trapped within for decades. So I watched Patrick's inflated mask of virility wither away to expose the quivering larva beneath. And I drank in the delicious beauty of his unraveling demise with an almost rapturous sense of cathartic release. At long last, true justice was being served. In the days following Patrick's arrest, I felt unmoored, untethered from any sense of certainty or equilibrium. While his confession to the FBI brought some twisted form of closure about Mom's fate, it also unleashed a torrent of fresh trauma to process. How could one man's reprehensible existence have inflicted such a gravitational pull of agony on my family? First tanking my parents' marriage, then robbing me of any real relationship with Mom in her final years, and finally orchestrating her agonizing demise purely to sever any loose ends that could implicate his criminal empire. Most nights, I barely slept. Visions of Mom engulfed in scorching flames invaded my subconscious, mingling with the horrific knowledge of what became of her remains. No child should ever have to visualize such waking nightmares about their parents' last agonizing moments. Eric tried valiantly to be my anchor during those dark days, but I still felt myself drifting unmoored across a vast void of emptiness. Only the prospect of ensuring Patrick's final, ultimate downfall gave me any sense of purpose to cling to. That pivotal moment arrived a few weeks later in a drab federal courthouse in Newark. I sat in the gallery wearing a crisp black pantsuit, my features carved from stone as Patrick shuffled into the courtroom, shackled at the wrists and ankles. Even that hideous burnt-orange prison jumpsuit failed to diminish the malignant aura of ego and menace that radiated from his pores. As our eyes met across the courtroom, his lips twisted into a sneer of pure malice. "You'll get yours, you meddlesome little." His guttural threat was drowned out by the bailiff's barked warning. I didn't flinch. Whatever venom Patrick hoped to unleash could never eclipse the suffering he had put me through. The opening volley of his sentencing hearing unleashed a blistering fusillade of charges: money laundering, embezzlement, racketeering, drug trafficking, illicit weapons distribution. The list stretched on unending. With each new lurid criminal count, Patrick seemed to shrink into himself, the arrogant bluster chipped away by the implacable weight of his irredeemable transgressions. Finally, the fatal blow was delivered. "Furthermore, you are charged with capital murder in the first degree for orchestrating the arson and death by immolation of your wife, Marianne Porter." A guttural cry escaped Patrick's lips before he could stifle it. He slumped forward, straining against his shackles as great heaving sobs racked his hulking frame. In an instant, the formidable veneer of the ruthless crime boss evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a wretched, broken shell of a man desecrating what shred of dignity he had left. I watched with no semblance of pity as the living embodiment of all my childhood trauma melted into a quivering puddle of remorse and cowardice before my very eyes. Eric slipped an arm around my shoulders, but I shook it off, leaning forward to drink in every agonizing second of Patrick's downfall. By the time the laundry list of charges concluded, we had moved into the sentencing phase. Patrick seemed to shrink further with each damning recommendation from the cold-eyed federal prosecutor. In light of the staggering breadth and depravity of the defendant's crimes, from this court's estimation, he constitutes an ongoing sociopathic menace to society without any realistic path towards rehabilitation. I tuned out the precise verbiage of the prosecutor's acidic dressing down of Patrick's biohazardous humanity, simply letting the torrent of venom wash over me. This was Patrick's penance finally being delivered. A life arithmetic sentence of suffering to counterbalance every second of torment his litany of evil had inflicted upon our family. Given the manifest hopelessness of his soul, this court can discern no motivation for leniency regarding the maximum possible prison term. As the gavel thundered down with a boom of finality, sealing Patrick's fate, I let out the breath I didn't realize I had been holding. It was over. Really, truly over. Eric gently squeezed my hand, concern flickering across his features. "Are you all right?" I didn't have the words to convey the complex riptide of emotions crashing through my being. So instead, I simply nodded and locked my gaze on Patrick's withered, sobbing frame being dragged away by the bailiffs. Staring into those dead, broken eyes, I knew Mom's spirit could finally rest in peace, and maybe eventually mine could too. At long last, the karma had restored balance to our fractured world. In the aftermath of Patrick's sentencing, an unfamiliar sense of hollowness consumed me. For months, my singular driving force had been seeking justice and vengeance for my mother's demise. Now that it was secured, what was left? I supposed part of me naively expected to feel a profound sense of catharsis once her killer's fate was sealed. like an anvil of emotional baggage would miraculously be lifted off my shoulders, freeing me to move forward unencumbered into a new chapter of life. Yet if anything, the great void left over felt more oppressive than the weight of the trauma itself. Achieving the vengeance did not magically fill the crevasse left by Mom's permanent absence. No punishment could ever make up for her being robbed from this world far too soon. In those first few weeks of unmoored purgatory, Dad became my lifeline. Eric encouraged me to lean on him as I slowly put the pieces back together. I started joining Dad and Eva for their weekly Sunday dinners, a ritual Mom used to cherish before everything went to hell. At first, my heart ached with every familiar home-cooked dish laid out on their battered kitchen table. Glazed ham, sweet potato casserole, all of Mom's well-worn family recipes. Smells that instantly transported me back to a simpler, happier time. Dad would squeeze my hand, his green eyes glistening with warmth and empathy as we made our way through those early, gut-wrenching meals. He recognized all the tangled layers of anguish I was wading through. Losing Mom completely, finally learning the truth about her fate, then having to process the sweet relief of justice achieved in confronting her killer. Gradually, as winter melted into spring, the rawness of those losses gave way to a quiet acceptance. I found solace in reconnecting with Dad and the family-centric traditions Mom had so valued, watching him and Eva bicker playfully over setting the table or swapping inside jokes about grandkids. I glimpsed flashes of the grounded, joyful domesticity that could still exist even in the wake of life's calamities. And for the first time it occurred to me that Mom, in her eternal, spiritual form, wouldn't want me and Dad stagnating in grief or dwelling on past traumas. She'd want us to keep living fully with open hearts, surrounding ourselves with those small rituals and loved ones that nourished the soul. One crisp April evening, following a jovial family game night, Eva hugged me tightly as we said our goodbyes. "I'm so glad you've been coming around more often, Lila. Your mom would be overjoyed to see you and your dad reconnecting like this." I pulled back, shocked to feel dampness pricking my eyes. "You really think so?" "Oh, honey?" Eva cupped my cheek, her twinkling eyes shining with compassion. "The most important people in our lives never truly leave us, as long as we keep honoring their memory through the way we live. Your mama's strength and resilience flows through you in such a powerful way." Those simple words were profoundly validating. For so long, the gaping void left over from Mom's death had felt unconquerable. Like a pitch-black cosmic abyss, I was destined to remain trapped inside indefinitely. But reframing her spirit into something alive and eternal that lived on through my actions, that shifted my entire perspective. Over the ensuing weeks, that subtle reframing helped catalyze an inner metamorphosis. The all-consuming thirst for vengeance cooled into a state of serene acceptance. While what happened to Mom was unforgivable, letting it consume me any longer would be an insult to the vibrant way she lived. So I channeled that newfound inner strength Mom embodied into my own life with a revitalized sense of purpose. I doubled down on my teaching career, aiming to become an inspirational mentor like the ones who had nurtured ME during those turbulent high school years. And when I wasn't shaping young minds, I simply tried to soak in each rich moment surrounded by the people who gave me strength. Eric, Dad, Eva, and even those crazy boggle game nights. Months turned into years, yet that internal ember stayed stoked, fueling me onward. I'd occasionally catch glimpses of Patrick's wretched existence rotting behind bars on the news, but it triggered none of the usual rage or darkness within me. Just a placid sense of equilibrium, karma restoring balance to the universe. That void Mom's death left behind would never be filled in completely, of course. But I came to embrace the hollowed space as a profound reminder of how precious life remains for those of us still present and thriving. Her light may have been prematurely extinguished, but it endured in both my soul and actions daily. So while a piece of my heart would eternally remain cradled in sorrow over losing her, the rest of it steadily rebounded, open and hungry to fill with as much hard-won joy and purpose as this wild journey could muster. It's what Mom would have wanted, and that became the sustaining force helping me persevere one day at a time. The bank statement practically leapt off the desk at me, numbers and transactions blaring like a siren. My heart pounded as I scanned the unfamiliar account, registered to Derek's name alone. Luxury apartment fees, jewelry store purchases, expensive restaurants. I barely recognized my husband of 22 years in those cold, hard numbers. The Derek I thought I knew would never. The front door slammed, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. "Lena, you home?" My mouth went dry as Derek strode into the den, his broad shoulders filling the doorframe. I clutched the damning statement, coiled for the confrontation I'd avoided for too long. "What is this?" I thrust the papers toward him, voice trembling. Derek's eyes widened, almost comically, before his expression hardened. He exhaled slowly and dropped onto the couch. "I was going to tell you." "Tell me what?" I snapped. "That you've been living some sort of double life? Spending money we don't have on what? Some mistress?" The word hung in the air, bitter and accusatory. Part of me hoped he'd deny it, laugh off my suspicions as par for the course after years of fertility struggles. We'd been through so much, surely. Derek's jaw tightened, and he leveled me with a look utterly devoid of emotion. Something inside me cracked at the cold finality in his eyes. "Her name is Elise," he said evenly. "I'm in love with her, Lena, and I want a divorce." The words detonated like a bomb, shattering the illusion of the life we'd so carefully constructed. My legs shook as the truth slammed into me. "How could you?" I whispered hoarsely. "After all this time? After everything we've been through?" Derek's expression didn't falter. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But it's over, Lena. I'm leaving you for Elise." The bank statement crumpled in my fist as 22 years of marriage disintegrated around me. How could the man I loved become this stranger before me? Fury blazed through my shock, burning away the disbelief. "Oh no, Derek. This is just the beginning." I straightened my spine, squaring my shoulders to face the cruel, harsh reality before me. No more feigned ignorance or sweeping things under the rug. You want a divorce? You'll get one. But not before I make you pay for this betrayal. I sat motionless on the couch, the crumpled bank statement still clutched in my fist as Derek's words echoed in my mind. "I'm leaving you for Elise." The casual cruelty of it felt like a searing brand. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a gutting. After decades of partnership, of struggling and sacrificing to build a life, he was tossing me aside for a woman nearly half his age. White-hot rage ignited in my chest, singeing away the shock and disbelief. How dare he? How dare he defile our marriage vows over some cheap thrill with a younger model? Derek cleared his throat. "Look, Lena, I know this is difficult, but I've already talked to a lawyer about divorcing quickly and quietly. It's best for both of us to just move on." I raised my eyes to meet his impassive stare. "Move on? Just like that?" He shrugged, seemingly oblivious to the vitriol burning in my veins. "We don't have kids. It'll be a clean break. I'm willing to be more than generous with the settlement to avoid any mess." My lip curled in disgust. "You think throwing money at me makes up for your despicable behavior? I invested over 20 years in our life, our marriage, and you want to discard me for that? That woman?" "Her name is Elise." A muscle ticked in Derek's jaw. "And yes, I love her. Does she know about the sordid lies and manipulation?" I shot back. "Or did you just dazzle the little gold digger with your bank statements?" Derek's palm slammed the side table, rattling the lamp. "Don't you dare talk about her like that. Elise isn't some fling or sugar baby fantasy. What we have is real." I barked out a bitter laugh. "You're delusional if you think that girl looks at you as anything more than a wallet she can lie back for." In a flash, Derek was on his feet, towering over me with flushed cheeks and flared nostrils. For the first time, I felt a flicker of fear at the wrath simmering in his eyes. "That's enough," he snarled, features twisted with rage. "I'm done with your jealous vitriol. I'm taking Elise and leaving this miserable marriage behind for good." I rose to my full height, holding his furious gaze steadily. The sharp scent of his cologne filled my nostrils, so painfully familiar, yet suddenly soured. "Don't threaten me, Derek," I said in a low, dangerous tone. "I'm just getting started." The divorce papers landed on my lap with a heavy thud, the stark black ink seeming to bleed accusation. I traced the legal jargon with a fingertip, sneering at Derek's grand romantic declaration to Elise Matthews buried amidst the dense text. My lip curled. So that was her full name. With narrowed eyes, I reached for my laptop. If Derek wanted to burn our life to the ground over this woman, I would learn exactly who I was dealing with. A few deft keystrokes pulled up Elise's social media profiles. A perfectly curated highlight reel of pouting selfies, designer outfits, and luxurious vacation scenes. I felt bile rise in my throat at the obnoxiously hashtag captions like, "living my best life," and "treat yourself." The more I scrolled through the meticulously documented narcissism, the more something else emerged. A pattern. Photos with a rotating cast of older, wealthy-looking men. Brief flashes of Chanel bags, penthouse apartments, and elite country clubs that a 29-year-old boutique clerk could scarcely afford alone. "Well, well," I murmured darkly, "the mistress has quite the lucrative hobby." A brisk knock sounded at the front door, startling me from my vitriolic reverie. I frowned. Derek was at work. Who else would? "Lena? It's Karen. Open up." Schooling my features, I swung open the door to my friend and neighbor of 15 years. Karen's brow furrowed at my carefully neutral expression. "Oh, honey, you look like hell. I brought wine and Chunky Monkey." She trailed off, taking in the discord strewn across the living room, the divorce papers, my laptop still open to Elise Matthews' Instagram candids. Karen's mouth formed a tight line as understanding dawned. She brushed past me without a word, heading straight for the kitchen to uncork the Merlot. I sank onto the bar stool across from her, gratefully accepting the large pour. Karen took a sip, grimacing slightly. "So, Derek's having an affair with a younger woman." It wasn't a question. I merely nodded, swallowing a mouthful of bitter wine. "God, Lena, I'm so sorry," Karen sighed. "If there's anything I can do to help." At that, a harsh laugh twisted free of my throat. "Actually, there might be. I need to know everything about this Elise Matthews." Karen's perfectly arched eyebrows climbed. "You want me to?" "What, exactly?" "I'm going to bleed that little harlot dry," I stated flatly. "She's not taking my husband and my life without learning a permanent lesson." A heavy silence fell between us, punctuated only by the hollow thunk of Karen refilling our glasses. Finally, she leaned forward, lips curved into a vindictive smile that could have curdled milk. "Where do we start?" The auditorium buzzed with the dull roar of hundreds of conversations. I smoothed my palms over my skirt, willing my hands not to tremble as I approached the stage. Derek sat front and center, his arm draped possessively around the waist of that insipid little blonde, Elise. My pulse thundered in my ears as I climbed the steps to the podium. This was it. My opening salvo, in destroying their shamelessly flaunted affair. I caught Karen's approving nod from the wings and drew a steadying breath. "Good evening, everyone." My voice rang clear across the hall, commanding rapt attention. "I'd like to start by thanking you all for coming to this community fundraiser." Derek's brow furrowed slightly as he leaned in to whisper something to Elise. The cheap floozy merely tossed her hair and smirked. I steeled myself, fingers clenching the podium. "Before we begin, however, I feel I must address a rather personal matter, an embarrassing situation my family has recently suffered." Whispers began to circulate, but I pressed on, projecting every ounce of calm I could muster. "You see, my husband Derek has seen fit to engage in unsavory behavior unbecoming of a respected businessman and philanthropist in our town." I paused, letting the implication detonate. Derek had gone rigid, his face mottling an ugly crimson. Elise placed a mollifying hand on his arm, but I could see the first flickers of unease in her painted features. "Derek has not only cheated on me with a gold-digging mistress less than half his age," I proclaimed, "but he's been embezzling funds from his business to finance their tawdry affair and her lavish lifestyle." A strangled sound of rage erupted from Derek's direction as the auditorium exploded into a fervent buzz. I caught a glimpse of his business partners exchanging shell-shocked looks from their seats. Elise tugged frantically on Derek's sleeve, her practiced poise rapidly cracking. But I wasn't finished yet. Not by a long shot. "In fact, you should all be aware that this woman, Elise Matthews, has a history of preying on wealthy older men, draining their resources to fund her vain and vacuous desires." At that, Elise shot to her feet, features twisted into an enraged snarl. "You psychotic bitch! How dare you!" "Enough!" Derek bellowed, his face near purple with humiliation and fury. He whipped around to face his stunned colleagues. "Don't listen to her lies and hysterics. This is just a jealous ploy because I wanted a divorce." "So you admit to infidelity and mishandling company funds?" one of his partners challenged, eyes flashing dangerously. I could practically see the ground crumbling beneath Derek's feet, just a little more to ensure he lost everything. "Thank you all for your time," I said smoothly, letting the implication hang in the silence. "Please give generously to tonight's cause. It's for the children, after all." With that parting barb, I stepped off the stage and allowed the thunderous roar of shock and outrage to swallow Derek and his mistress whole. As awed whispers trailed me from the auditorium, I felt the first tremors of vicious satisfaction. Let the fallout from that display of truth rain down on them both. This was merely the opening salvo. Derek's reckoning had only just begun. "This is insane, Lena. Have you lost your mind?" Derek slammed through the front door, chest heaving and red splotches mottling his face. Elise trailed behind, her designer blouse rumpled and eyes rimmed with smudged makeup. "Looks like someone's fairy tale is crumbling." I arched an eyebrow, keeping my expression coolly impassive. "I'm simply telling the truth about your misdeeds, Derek. The masses deserve to know what kind of man you really are." "This has gone too far," he snarled, closing the distance between us with 3 long strides. Elise shrank back against the wall. "My partners are demanding an emergency audit and investigation based on your slanderous little performance," I said softly. "Well, that is rather awkward if you've been, shall we say, misappropriating funds?" Derek's fist clenched convulsively at his side. "You're deranged, you know that? This vendetta won't end well for you." "On the contrary," I countered coolly, "I haven't even properly begun." Elise piped up then, shaky voice laden with righteous indignation. "You're just a bitter, jealous old woman who can't handle being cast aside for someone better." Derek shot her a warning look, but the poisonous words kept spilling forth. "Derek loves me, in a way he could never love your frigid, shriveled husk." The resounding crack of my palm across her cheek reverberated through the hall. Elise froze, one hand pressed to her reddening face, eyes swimming with stunned tears. My voice was lethal calm. "I'm going to make this very simple for your tiny, materialistic brain to comprehend, you cheap little tramp." I punctuated each word with a jab of my finger into her sternum. "No one is taking anything from me, least of all my husband of over 20 years. Not without paying a devastating price." I leaned closer, nostrils flaring, close enough for her to smell the wrath simmering beneath my skin. "Derek threw away our life together to chase after a pretty young thing whose vapid, soulless company he could buy like a common prostitute, a disposable infatuation to stroke his fragile ego." Tears spilled over Elise's garish makeup as her mouth worked soundlessly. Derek looked like he might implode from bottled rage. I held up a manicured finger, sking again. Now, don't get upset. This has all been a valuable lesson, really." Reaching into my pocket, I extracted a glossy 8x10 photograph and slapped it against Elise's chest. She flinched, then froze as her gaze landed on the incriminating image. What is this?" Her voice hitched with bewildered dismay. The photo captured Derek in a grainy, compromising embrace with another woman outside a downtown hotel. A tall, willowy redhead in an unmistakably short skirt. Derek's face drained of color as realization set in. "You spawn of Satan. That's not what you think." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Elise's mouth twisted with anguished accusation as the first fissures cracked through their sordid facade. "Thank you for stopping by," I said pleasantly, gesturing toward the exit. "Do give my regards to your—" I paused delicately. "Friend?" The retort detonated like a grenade, with showering them both in fragments of the distrust and suspicion I'd carefully cultivated. They fled without a backwards glance, too consumed by their fresh turmoil to hurl any parting shots my way. A vindicated smirk tugged at my lips as the door slammed behind them. Phase 2 was officially underway. Let's see how much her professed love could withstand when laced with paranoia and doubt. The rapid staccato of Karen's knuckles against my front door made me jolt from my brooding reverie. I swung it open to find her grinning like a feral cat, perfectly coiffed hair askew. "You'll never guess what fresh hell I just witnessed," she declared without preamble. I arched an eyebrow. "Do tell." "I was at the club getting my weekly massage when who should stomp through the lobby looking like a sadistic bridezilla but our dear Elise." Karen skit, shaking her head slowly. Let's just say the claws were out. She was practically frothing at the mouth, demanding to know Derek's every movement and screaming accusations at anyone who dared make eye contact. A vindicated smirk tugged at my lips. I take it the show of distrust is my handiwork taking root? Oh, without a doubt. From what I could gather, Elise is utterly convinced Derek is having another affair to retaliate against her for, well, her own affair. Karen snorted indelicately. Guess she can dish it out but not take it. Fabulous. Let her suffer the same torment of suspicion and humiliation she inflicted on me. I felt a kernel of vicious glee unfurl in my chest. What about Derek? A sniveling, raging mess from what I witnessed, Karen continued with relish. Flinched every time his phone rang, started shouting down poor Steve in accounting about unauthorized charges on the company card. His world is unraveling at last, I mused. Good. There's more, Karen said, eyes glinting with undisguised glee. Word around the club is that Derek's business partners are circling like sharks smelling blood in the water. All this scrutiny you've brought down on him is finally catching up. I hummed in satisfaction, tamping down the feral delight that clawed at my rib cage. I suspected embezzling funds to subsidize his little kept woman would prove rather damning behavior. It's a massacre, honey, Karen cackled. They're tearing into every aspect of his finances and business dealings with a fine-tooth comb. The lawsuits and investigations are piling up like a multi-car crash. She threw back her mane of blonde curls with a victorious toss. From the whispers I've heard, it's only a matter of weeks before the entire sordid truth comes barreling out. Endless evidence of Derek's shady dealings to keep Elise living in the lap of luxury she so greedily craves. My chest constricted with deep, primal sense of retribution finally being served. The bastard's entire sham of a life was crumbling under the weight of his own duplicity and misdeeds, and his precious, mercenary mistress was getting dragged through the flames with him. Karen's gleaming eyes bored into me shrewdly. You've already won, Lena. Why continue twisting the knife when he has nothing left to lose? Wouldn't it be more dignified to walk away with your head held high? I considered her rhetoric for a half-second before laughing dryly. You must be joking, Karen. After the indignities he put me through, the utter disrespect and debasement for over 2 decades of marriage? The mirth drained from my face like a switch being flicked. No, the path of devastation is only just beginning for Derek and that gold-digging whore. This is what happens when you cross me. An unexpected thrill raced through my veins, hardening my resolve into something merciless and unyielding as steel. There will be no forgiveness and no walking away with my head held high. They deserve to drown in the fires of deception they started, and I intend to ensure that happens in the most brutal, humiliating fashion imaginable. Karen's brittle smile faltered slightly at the frigid resonance in my tone. Very well, she replied after a tense beat. Just remember, my dear, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. I bared my teeth in a feral grin. Then it's a good thing I'll be the last one standing. The sleek chrome handle of Derek's office door felt like ice against my palm. I paused for the barest moment, lips curving into a predatory smile before pushing inside. Derek jumped violently at the intrusion, his ashen features reflecting the haggard toll of the last few weeks. Elise, ensconced on the sofa beside him, looked equally worse for wear, brittle and desperate in rumpled designer clothes. This charade of theirs was crumbling to dust. Lena. Derek's gravelly voice seeped wariness like an open wound. What the hell are you doing here? I swept into the room, every click of my heels reverberating with finality. It's time we had a long overdue discussion. Ignoring the twin looks of mingled confusion and resentment, I settled into the chair opposite them with studied nonchalance. I simply wanted to congratulate you, Elise scoffed, tossing her lank hair over one bony shoulder. For what? Being a raging psycho bitch. For helping me see the truth, I replied, saccharine sweet. About my husband, about your proclivities. Understanding flickered in Derek's sunken eyes first. Elise's brow furrowed before intuition rapidly replaced her scowl with stricken dismay. That's right, I continued in a low purr. I know all about your little habit, my dear. How many pathetic rich men have you run this exact grift on over the years? Flashing a bit of thigh and silicone until they empty their wallets for a fling with some arm candy? My gaze lasered into hers with surgical precision. How much, I wonder, was their humiliation and heartbreak worth buying for you? Derek's indiscretion is only your latest score before moving on to the next mark. You crazy bitch, Elise hissed, surging upright only for Derek's hand to clamp around her trembling wrist. Save it, Elise, he bit out hoarsely. The jig is up. I chuckled darkly, burgundy nails drumming the armrest. I must commend you, truly, for your restraint these past weeks, clinging to your wounded dignity as everything crumbled. Derek's little outbursts, the gnawing dread something even worse lurked beneath the surface. They watched me warily, both coiled tighter than caged lions as I toyed with their discomfort. Did you think the foundation-rattling scandals and driving a wedge between you was the full extent of my revenge? I tisked pityingly. Oh no, those were simply precursors, hors d'oeuvres to whet the palate. Sudden movement at the door made them flinch. Karen strode in briskly, a bulging manila envelope tucked under one arm. You remember Karen, I trust, I drawled. She's been an invaluable asset in compiling the most comprehensive possible evidence detailing your tangled web of lies, manipulations, and moral depravities. With a flourish, Karen upended the envelope over my desk, spilling a damning array of documents and photographs in a cascading slush pile. Derek's face went glazed with horror, mouth moving soundlessly. Bank statements, accounting ledgers, photos of you two in rather compromising situations, I listed with a serpent's smile. All the grist for the most wildly public and humiliating disintegration of your lives imaginable. Tears sprang in Elise's eyes as the reality crushed down on her. Why? How could you? How could I? I arched a delicately groomed eyebrow. After being so utterly debased and discarded by the person who vowed eternal fidelity, you brought 1,000 times worse upon yourselves with your selfish hedonism and emotional evisceration of me. Standing abruptly, I braced my palms on the desk and leaned into their faces with a barely restrained snarl. This ruination you're experiencing, the total obliteration of everything you value, consider it the mere flensing slice of my scalpel. The true torture is only just beginning. Sudden movement in my periphery made my head whip around, to Derek, halfway out the door, wild-eyed and gasping like a lanced bull. Derek! Elise cried, voice shredded. But he barely reacted, consumed by blind panic as he fled headlong into the cold oblivion of his own making. A vindicated smile stretched my lips as I watched the corridor swallow him. Good. Run while you can, you sniveling coward. There's no escape from paying this penance. Not as long as I still draw breath. The plush leather sofa creaked faintly as I settled onto it, fingers curling around the glass of deep Cabernet. A satisfied sigh slipped past my lips as the rich, oaky bouquet enveloped my senses. Karen's bemused voice cut through the crackling silence. You're looking far too smug for someone who just torched her entire life to the ground. My gaze slid lazily toward her, one sculpted eyebrow arching. Don't be obtuse, Karen. You were there through the whole sordid affair. You witnessed firsthand how that life had already been incinerated by that pathetic snake in the grass I called a husband. A rueful chuckle bubbled up. I simply cleared away the ashen remains of my own existence to make way for something new, something revitalized and liberated from the shackles of the past. Taking a slow sip, I let the robust flavor linger on my tongue before continuing. This may surprise you, but I harbor Derek no further ill will. In the end, I made him pay the ultimate price. The annihilation of all he valued, his assets, his business, his reputation. All of it dismantled with the brutal efficiency he used to butcher our marriage. My smile carved deeper, almost feral. Even his precious little mistress abandoned him after I systematically crushed her delusions of being his one true love. A derisive snort punctured the satisfaction hardening in my chest. Just another tawdry notch on her bedpost before inevitably moving on to drain the next wealthy fool. Swirling the deep crimson liquid, I watched the reflections dance hypnotically. No, I don't pity Derek in the slightest. He had the abject humiliation of losing everything coming in spades. Not a soul will dignify him with a shred of sympathy or respect again after the depths of his craven self-preservation were exposed. Draining the glass in one smooth swallow, the rich flavors left a deliciously singed trail down my throat. I set it aside and rose fluidly. I'm not looking back. Derek ushered in his own demise through his actions. A mirthless trill of laughter sliced through the weighted silence. which is ultimately the karmic justice in all of this. The detonation he triggered to discard me like a husk only managed to obliterate his facade of affluence and rectitude. Fisting my hands on my hips, I turned to face Karen's impassive features head-on. Now it's my turn to do the discarding, to slough off the bitter rancor and embrace a life beholden to no one but myself and my passions. A ghost of a smile played across Karen's lips. Going off to find your next soulmate, then? My bark of genuine laughter rattled the fine china in its cabinet. Heavens no, I'm quite happily divorcing the entire notion of romance after this sordid detour. Thank you very much. Extending a hand, I pulled Karen to her feet and enveloped her in a fierce hug of gratitude. My only guests to covet now are beloved friendships like yours. Everything else is done on my terms, by my rules. Pulling back, I smoothed her satin lapels almost maternally. As for the next chapter? Well, who says I can't dive back into my teaching career with fresh perspective and zero shackles weighing me down? Travel wherever my wanderlust takes me? Or hell, even ditch this town entirely and disappear on a vineyard in Tuscany? A beatific smile bloomed across my face at the unscripted horizon of possibilities unfurling gloriously before me. After 20-something years of self-sacrifice and emotional purgatory, the world was my personal oyster now. Pearly laughter spilled unbidden from my lips as I spun away, arms flung wide in a gesture of pure liberation. The future shimmered ahead, effervescent and radiant and utterly, gloriously mine. The faint glow of dawn seeped through the bedroom curtains as I slowly awoke. Groggily, I reached across the sheets, expecting to find Martin beside me, but instead found his side of the bed empty and growing cold. Strange, he's usually still sleeping at this hour unless... A soft creak from the closet grabbed my attention. I stilled my breathing, feigning sleep as Martin emerged tiptoeing towards the bedroom door. He was already fully dressed in one of his crisp suits. "Martin," I called out, my voice laced with confusion. "Where are you going so early?" He froze, cursing under his breath before turning to face me with a tight smile. "Morning, hon. I've got an early meeting with a new client, that's all. Important deal I can't afford to miss." My eyes narrowed at his vague explanation. Martin was usually so forthcoming with details about his real estate dealings. "At the crack of dawn? That's unlike you." "Yeah, well, this guy's an eccentric type. Wants to meet at some scenic overlook to discuss listing his property at sunrise." Martin shrugged as if it were the most normal request. "Gotta do what the client wants, right?" I pursed my lips, mulling over his words but deciding not to press further for now. As a freelance editor, I know better than anyone how to read between the lines, and the nagging uncertainty clouding Martin's tone spoke volumes. With a quick kiss that felt more obligatory than loving, Martin hurried out, the front door clicking shut behind him. I remained in bed, my mind spinning as suspicion took root. When had he last worked so hard to impress a client? Ever since those shady real estate investors had swept into town, buying up prime properties left and right, his deals and our income had become inconsistent at best. Yet just last week, Martin had surprised me by putting a down payment on the dream home we'd been saving for. He claimed to have struck a lucrative deal with a big client. At the time, I was so delighted by the prospect of finally escaping our cramped apartment that I didn't think to question the details. But now, on the heels of his strange disappearing act, unease churned my stomach. I flung off the covers, determined to investigate. If Martin thought he could lie straight to my face, I would equip myself with the truth, no matter how painful. The smell of fresh coffee beckoned from the kitchen as I shuffled in, sleep still weighing heavily on me. I moved towards the counter where Martin's phone lay abandoned and quickly scooped it up. My heart pounded as I entered the passcode, our dating anniversary so predictable, and pulled up his messages. That's when I saw it. Pages upon pages of flirtatious texts from some contact labeled Client 9. Intimate photos and innuendos laced every message, the latest of which read, "Can't wait to take you to our special spot at dawn, babe. Hurry, I'm waiting." The phone slipped from my trembling hand and clattered against the tile as tears stung my eyes. How many nights had Client 9 lured Martin away under the guise of shady business deals? Why had I been so blind? No, I wouldn't be the fool any longer. Whoever this Chris was, I vowed to uncover every last detail about their insidious relationship with my husband. The truth would turn their dawn rendezvous into a brutal morning after. When Martin finally slunk home that evening, I was waiting. The smell of his cheap cologne wafted through the apartment as he shuffled in, head bowed. Well, how was your big important meeting?" I asked coldly, eyes narrowed. Martin started, clearly not expecting me to be up. "Lila, you're still awake?" "Don't play dumb with me." I stepped towards him, holding up his phone so he could see the incriminating texts displayed on the screen. "I know all about your client 9. Who is she, Martin?" His face paled as his eyes landed on the explicit messages. For a moment, he seemed to wrestle with what lie to spin. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. It's not what you think, babe. I can explain." I scoffed loudly at his feeble excuse. "Explain? Were you not just exchanging naked pictures and sexting with this woman? Is that just how you schmooze all your real estate clients these days?" No, of course not," Martin sputtered, finally meeting my furious glare. There was fear in his eyes, but also a sickening glimpse of desperation, like a caged animal seeking any possible exit. "Then what possible excuse could you have?" I shouted, throwing the phone at his feet in disgust. "Who is this client 9 you've been sneaking around with at the crack of dawn? Another one of your sordid business partners trying to buy up half the town?" For a moment, rage seemed to steal Martin's expression. His lips curled into a sneer as he took a step towards me. "You want to know who she is? Fine. Her name is Avery. She's a young, brilliant real estate developer I've been working with on some lucrative investment opportunities." His gaze dropped meaningfully to my body. "The kind of woman who actually keeps a man satisfied, if you know what I mean." White-hot anger lanced through me at his callous insinuation. I recoiled, hand stinging from where I'd struck him across the cheek. Martin hissed, cradling his reddened face as his eyes bored into me with intense loathing. Any remaining love in his stare had shriveled and died. "You hit me, you crazy bi? Don't you dare!" I roared, cutting him off. Every shred of our once passionate marriage seemed to be crumbling to dust between us. In that moment of icy silence, the full scope of his betrayal finally crystallized. Months, maybe years of lying and cheating laid bare. Clearly our vows, our decades-long partnership, meant nothing compared to chasing the next dirty deal with his newest squeeze. Tears sprang unbidden to my eyes, though I fought to blink them away. I would not allow Martin the satisfaction of seeing me emotionally broken. Not after everything he'd done. "Get out!" I gritted through clenched teeth, jabbing a trembling finger towards the door. "Take your lucrative opportunities and your whore and get the hell out of my home." For a long moment, Martin simply stared at me mutely, perhaps finally recognizing the cold fury simmering behind my words. Then, with a look of mingled hatred and fear, he turned and slunk out like the coward he was. Only once the door had slammed did I finally allow myself to crumple to the floor in racking sobs. My husband, my life partner and best friend for over 10 years, was gone, replaced by a hollow, money-chasing stranger. But this was not the end, I vowed. No, this was just the beginning of making that bastard pay for what he'd done to me, to us. No matter what it took, Martin would atone for his sins, and I already had the perfect idea of where to start digging up the proof to destroy him. The next few days passed in a blur as I dove headfirst into investigating Martin's sordid activities. I was a woman possessed, fueled by heartbreak and the burning desire for vengeance. Using my old connections from teaching, I leveraged every resource to dig up dirt on not just Martin's mistress Avery, but also his shadier business partners and deals. The more I uncovered, the more disgusted I became. It turned out Avery was the ambitious daughter of a wealthy property developer muscling in on all the prime real estate around town. Young, beautiful, and dripping in entitlement, she seemed to have her pretty manicured claws sunk into every shady dealer and corporation looking to gentrify the area. And right at the center of it all, like a greedy parasite, was my husband. Feeding off Avery's affluent connections to broker under-the-table deals that slowly bled our community dry of affordable housing and opportunity, all in exchange for money coursing into their pockets. Just thinking about the scale of their misdeeds made me ill. That my husband, my once caring, ethical life partner, could be so selfish and evil, it was a harsh awakening I wish I'd never received. But the worst was yet to come. Because the more I prodded, the more snippets of tawdry details about their affair also came to light. clandestine meetings at high-end hotels and clubs that catered to Avery's elite crowd of trust fund brats, hushed hideaways where they doubtlessly consummated their twisted desires, even sickeningly personalized pet names like Kitten and Hot Stuff that turned my stomach. The final insult was learning about their so-called special spot for pre-dawn trysts, a secluded overlook on the edge of town with a view of the historic district I'd fallen in love with when we first moved here years ago. Just imagining the two of them entangled together as the sun crested that breathtaking horizon was too much to bear. That was my line in the sand, my life's dream home that we'd scrimped and saved for, the cozy community we'd sworn to support and nurture together. Martin had perverted it all in pursuit of his greed and lust. I knew then that he needed to pay dearly for his sins. That smug, despicable gold-digger Avery as well. People like them couldn't be allowed to trample all over the lives of decent, hard-working folks just for the sake of lining their pockets. Which is why, when Terry, an old high school pal working private security, rang me up later that day, I was ready. Having filled him in on the sordid details, he was equally incensed at how low Martin had sunk. "I've got the location of their next little rendezvous," he muttered into the phone line, disgust coloring his tone. "If you want to catch the lovebirds in the act, just say the word and I'll make sure we're there." My jaw clenched at the thought of witnessing their intimacy with my own eyes. But I knew I needed undeniable proof of Martin's treachery to truly make my case, to bring his whole sordid charade crashing down once and for all. "Do it," I said simply, surprising myself with the cold vengeance in my voice. "I want to see the bastard burn for what he's done." Terry exhaled heavily. "You got it. I'll text you the details." As I hung up, I could feel the craving for revenge throbbing like a possession deep within me. Soon, very soon, Martin and his good-for-nothing mistress would reap what they'd sown tenfold. And I would be there to personally ensure it happened, no matter how ugly the truth became. The next few days were a whirlwind of carefully laying the groundwork for my revenge. I was like a woman possessed, my burning desire for vengeance against Martin fueling my every move. Step one was gathering as much indisputable evidence as possible of his infidelity and dodgy business dealings. Terry pulled through in a big way, using his security contacts to help me obtain incriminating documentation, phone records, bank statements, even surveillance footage from some of the hotels where Martin and Avery had their sordid trysts. As the damning pile grew, so too did the churning in my gut at the sheer extent of Martin's lies and betrayal. But I refused to let heartbreak or nausea deter me from my path. This was about justice, pure and simple. Next, I addressed the financial side. If I was going to serve Martin his long-overdue karmic comeuppance, I needed to be financially untethered from him. Thankfully, in my editing work, I'd cultivated a network of lawyers well-versed in high-stakes divorces. One lunchtime meeting was all it took to set the wheels in motion. "Here's what we're going to do," Rachel, a pit bull of a divorce attorney, stated bluntly as she pored over the evidence. "You lay low, keep gathering anything and everything you can implicate that sleazeball with. In the meantime, I'll get all the paperwork drafted for a no-contest divorce filing." "No contest?" I balked, anger flaring within me. "Are you kidding? After all he's done, that lying, cheating sack of shit should be left destitute on the street." Rachel held up a calming hand, unruffled by my sudden outburst. "Easy there, killer. Just trust me on this one. File no contest first to get the ball rolling. Once we're in court, that's when we bury the bastard under an avalanche of proof about his misdeeds." Her icy smile then was one of pure predatory confidence. "By the time I'm done with Martin, he'll be lucky if he can afford a cardboard box under an overpass." I couldn't help but smirk back, some of the weight lifting from my shoulders. With professionals like Rachel taking up the cause of securing my future, bringing Martin to his knees was beginning to feel like an inevitability rather than just wishful thinking. A few days later, the plan fully took shape when Terry called with a hushed update. "Got a bead on their upcoming meetup location. The Topaz Grand Hotel downtown this Friday night. Deluxe suite and everything." I felt bile rise in my throat, imagining the lavish setting where Martin would doubtlessly consummate his sickening affair yet again, all while lying, smiling to my face about working hard for our future family. We'll be there, I said with conviction. No more suspicions or accusations. It was time to catch that bastard red-handed once and for all. They're not going to know what hit them. Terry chuckled darkly. You got that right. I'll get the gear prepped to, appropriately document the occasion when it goes down. Good. They're going to regret the day they ever crossed me. I could almost see the smirk in Terry's tone. Sure, hope that sleazeball lawyer is ready to go full scorched earth once we hand over the, production materials from this sting. A savage grin split my lips as realization set in. By this time next week, the plan for annihilating Martin's entire pathetic existence would be an unstoppable force. Don't worry, I replied with feral certainty. Once the truth comes out, there won't be a soul alive who'll want anything to do with him or his whore ever again. My fist clenched hard enough to leave marks as visions of their imminent downfall danced before my eyes. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the sordid crimes. Soon, oh so very soon, Martin and his mistress would pay for every last sin 1,000-fold. No mercy. No turning back until total, righteous vengeance had been achieved. Friday night arrived with the weight of a looming storm. I could feel the electricity in the air, that tense sense of anticipation before everything goes to hell. Fitting, given the Category 5 reality check I was about to unleash on Martin and his mistress. Terry picked me up in an unmarked van, the back already kitted out with an array of audio-video gear and a bank of computer monitors. As we pulled up across the street from the Topaz Grand, my eyes were immediately drawn to the opulent high-rise. The bastards have the presidential suite on the top floor reserved, Terry muttered, watching my face closely for any trace of hesitation. When I simply clenched my jaw and nodded, he let out a low whistle. Damn, guess Martin's been spreading the wealth from those shady property deals around. Don't worry, it'll all be stripped away from him soon enough, I replied icily. We spent the next few tense hours painstakingly setting up the surveillance equipment and running through our plan one final time. As the evening crowds thinned out on the street, Terry's voice suddenly crackled over the comlink. Got eyes on the lovebirds entering the lobby. My stomach clenched as I peered out to see Martin striding through the revolving doors in a pressed designer suit, hand in hand with a gorgeous young woman I could only assume was Avery. She looked every inch the pretentious socialite trophy in a skin-tight cocktail dress and dripping in gaudy jewelry. Copy that, I replied, throat dry. We're going in hot in 5. Moments later, Terry and I burst from the van, sealed in low-profile tactical gear, body armor, tinted helmets, the full 9 yards to avoid being immediately recognized. From there, it was a whirlwind of dodging hotel security and stunned patrons as we slipped inside and blitzed our way up the service elevators to the top floor. My heart pounded like a jackhammer as we reached the ornate double doors to the suite. Terry checked his watch, gave me a single nod, then smoothly kicked one door in with bone-crunching force. Police, don't move, he bellowed in a voice so gruff and commanding it was as if a different person had emerged. The scene before us was sickening, and sadly also exactly what I'd pictured in my darkest imagination. There was Martin, sprawled naked as the day he was born across rumpled silk sheets, his equally nude mistress draped over him in a salacious position. They jumped apart like startled cats, eyes wide with shock and fear. Who the hell are you people? Martin stammered, struggling to cover himself. You liar, I roared, ripping off my helmet as I stormed forward. You cheating, thieving bastard. Did you really think you could get away with all of this forever? The color drained from Martin's face as recognition dawned. Lila? What are you doing here? Exposing you and your whore for the subhuman filth you are, I spat with venom. Terry, get the cameras rolling so we can capture every last second of this disgusting affair for the record. Terry grinned like a wolf and produced a camcorder, the blood-red recording light blinking as he slowly swept the lens across the den of sin we'd uncovered. Avery whimpered, clutching the sheets feebly in a pathetic attempt to cover herself. Wait, Lila, please. Martin scrambled off the bed, stumbling towards me with wild, pleading eyes. This isn't what it looks like, I swear. Everything I've done was for us, for our future. Future? I laughed, a bitter bark of contempt. What future did you possibly think we could have after betraying me like this? Sleeping with this 20-something gold digger behind my back for God knows how long. Avery flinched as if struck at the insult, opening her mouth to protest only for Terry to rudely jam the camera in her startled face. You don't get to speak, sweetheart, not after willingly spreading your legs for a lying, cheating sack of scum like Martin here. Smile pretty for the camera, though. I'm sure the footage will look great on the evening news. That certainly shut her up, fresh tears pooling in her eyes as she hunched miserably under the weight of her shame and disgrace. Heart racing, I rounded back on Martin with fire in my eyes. You want to talk futures? Then how about this? Once I take this irrefutable evidence of your infidelity straight to my lawyer's office Monday morning, our marriage will be over. Done. Finished. Martin's throat bobbed as he visibly paled. No, Lila, honey, please just let me expla. I don't want to hear another word out of your lying mouth, I shouted him down, wincing as my voice cracked with the force of my fury. You've swindled me, our community, even the freaking planet with all your greed and corruption for the last time, you bastard. Terry loomed over my shoulder, silently training the camera on Martin's stricken face. You're done, I hissed through clenched teeth. And God help me, I'll make sure you lose every last ill-gotten penny to your name once the courts get a hold of the evidence we've stacked against your slimy ass. Maybe jail time, if I'm lucky. As if to drive home the point, Terry shifted and angled his camera lens down Martin's petrified body, the crimson recording light bathing his shame in bloody hues. Nothing to say now, big man? Terry sneered. No last quips about how your little sugar baby there keeps you satisfied? Go on, tell the camera what a great investment of an affair she turned out to be. Martin could only sputter wordlessly, all traces of ego and arrogance shattered. He was finally seeing the beast he'd awoken in me, and there would be no escaping its wrath. Lip-curling in disgust, I turned away and headed for the exit. Consider yourself officially served divorce papers, Martin. Don't worry, I'll make sure you two love rats have plenty more appropriate accommodations set aside soon enough. With that parting shot, I was gone, leaving the sniveling, broken remains of my cad of a husband to fully understand just how profoundly he'd destroyed everything we'd once held dear. The street outside was a blur as Terry and I hastily made our escape, his gleeful laughter ringing in my ears. Between the rock-solid documented evidence and Martin's own self-incrimination, the battle to secure my vengeance had just been won in one fell swoop. The war for his total ruin, however, had only just begun. Over the next several months, I waged a merciless, one-woman war of attrition against Martin and the pathetic remains of his shattered existence. The first salvo came mere days after the events at the Topaz Grand, when I strode into Rachel's office and unceremoniously dumped an encrypted hard drive filled with the irrefutable video evidence of Martin's affair onto her desk. My God Almighty! The normally stoic lawyer muttered as she scrolled through sample clips, her expression wavering somewhere between sickened and delighted. I've represented some lousy bastards in my time, but this is a new low even for scumbags. Can you use it to bury him? I asked calmly. I want that whole empire of slime he's been building through insider real estate deals brought down on his head. Rachel flashed her trademark predatory grin. Oh, honey, you just leave that worthless sack of crap to me. With this, she gave the hard drive a gentle pat. Martin won't even be able to afford the cardboard box I joked about before. I'm talking complete, utter, scorched earth professional and financial ruin. And just like that, the divorce proceedings were kicked into maximum overdrive. Another heavy blow landed when I also took my grievances public, leaking the video evidence along with detailed breakdowns of Martin's illicit business dealings to every media outlet in the tri-state area. Within days, Martin's face and the sordid details of his betrayal were broadcasting into households across the nation. The embarrassing revelation of his tawdry sex acts alone would have been a kill shot to his professional reputation. But coupled with hard evidence of shady backroom deals, redirecting housing funds, and gentrifying entire neighborhoods like a virus, it was a towering inferno of outrage that quickly engulfed every aspect of his life. Most crucial were the legal ramifications. The deluge of information I'd provided opened the floodgates for a tidal wave of lawsuits, criminal indictments, and civic investigations that swiftly set upon dismantling every corrupt piece of Martin's real estate empire. Meanwhile, Avery was quickly tossed aside like a used rag once her involvement went public and she lost any shred of usefulness to Martin's ambitions. The poor, naive girl was left only with the shame of being characterized as a brainless socialite mistress chasing rich older guys. One by one, every property deal, investment portfolio, and business relationship Martin had cultivated crumpled to dust under the scorching judgment of litigation and public scrutiny. All his material wealth bled away in a relentless barrage of legal fees and back payments levied by the karmic justice system. The final, most personally satisfying death knell came when Rachel called to triumphantly inform me that the courts had ruled overwhelmingly in my favor on the divorce settlement. "Congratulations, Lila. We just relieved that swindling lowlife of every conceivable penny and asset he ever scammed his way into owning." I sat in silence, digesting her words, all the fury and grief finally coalescing into a strange sense of resolution. "So that's it then?" I asked at last. "He's going to be left with nothing?" Rachel chuckled darkly on the other end. "That's an understatement. Let's just say even the most generous of homeless shelters wouldn't take Martin in once I'm done burying him under the financial crater we just detonated on his head." For the longest moment I felt absolutely nothing. No joy, no lingering resentment, just stillness. The emotional storm fueling my quest for payback had well and truly passed. "Good," I said simply before politely ending the call. Then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, my shoulders slumped as the weight of my turmoil finally lifted. Martin was no more, just an unpleasant speck of cosmic debris drifting aimlessly through the void of his own making. He had willingly sacrificed everything, his marriage, dignity, career, and future, on the altar of depravity and greed. All that remained was to leave him there, powerless as the fires of consequence raged all around. I was free to move on and live a life unmarred by his betrayal, free to pursue joy and fulfillment once more, if I so chose. Whether Martin managed to escape that blazing hell of his own making or not no longer mattered. My personal demon had already been slain. In the months that followed my total victory over Martin, I found twisted amusement in silently observing the smoldering wreckage of his pathetic existence. It began with the inevitable, his sad little mistress Avery wising up and fleeing the second she realized there was no longer any status or payout to be leached from their sordid dalliance. All that remained of their once passionate, sinful love affair were snippets of security cam footage showing them screaming venomous insults before Avery stormed out of their sad apartment in a huff. Public humiliation, it seemed, had cooled the young bombshell's ardor quite effectively. Meanwhile, the multi-million-dollar legal settlements I'd won against Martin in divorce court ensured he was left scrambling and debt-ridden, his previously lavish life in ashes. Within weeks, the high-rise condo he'd wasted no time installing Avery in after leaving me was repossessed to help cover a fraction of his mounting penalties. All his ill-gotten assets, the luxury cars, the real estate holdings, even the vulgar art collection he'd amassed as sickly trophies of his wanton greed, were quickly liquidated to pay down the debts. Poetic justice at its finest. Speaking of which, the deluge of criminal charges that rained down in the wake of the affair's exposure also stuck. There was simply too much incriminating evidence of Martin's corporate grift and involvement with organized crime's real estate rackets for even his highest-priced legal team to salvage anything. That alone brought the petty man ego-shriveling shame for years to come, I'd wager. Forced to languish in a 6x8 cell, surrounded by the very same convicted thugs he'd made backroom deals with, seemed a fitting penance. There was one amusing incident in particular about a year into his sentence. A news report detailing how Martin had been stabbed by a fellow inmate after his identity as a wealthy corporate stooge came to light. Apparently, landing in prison broke is one of the quickest ways to get targeted by hard cases with a bone to pick against the moneyed elite. I couldn't help but chuckle darkly at the irony of it all. He'd invited such gruesome consequences onto himself through his own disgusting pursuit of material excess and debauchery. Part of me did almost pity the worm, if only for a fleeting moment. Though I understood Martin was reaping merely a fraction of the total devastation he truly deserved, focusing on him was a waste of additional energy. The real satisfaction came in cutting him out of my life entirely like the cancer he was, and moving on to brighter days. For instance, with the vast financial settlement burning a hole in my proverbial pocket, I took to indulging in little utopian projects close to my heart. Things that made me feel like I was truly giving back and helping uplift the community Martin had spent years trying to pervert and sell off for profit. The first and most cathartic of these endeavors came in the form of a youth community outreach center, providing hands-on mentorship programs, skills training workshops, and safe recreation spaces for disadvantaged kids and teens in our area. All hosted in a refurbished complex Martin had once scoped out to potentially raise for more gentrification. The grand opening was a particularly smug F.U. to Martin's memory. I'll never forget watching the inaugural ribbon cutting alongside the mayor and local education leaders to raucous cheers and applause. You have the bright green banners with the center's name, 4-person family outreach, flapping proudly in the breeze. So much for his ego-driven delusions of covering every square foot of the city in overpriced, bourgeois condoplexes. My proudest accomplishment was built on the remains of his greed in a beautiful twist of fate. The uplifting work of helping shape young lives and foster a new generation of civic leaders quickly became my guiding purpose. I found the experience so empowering and rewarding after my personal trials that I decided to double down, reaching out to urban planning committees and local universities to establish more development initiatives aimed at ethical, low-cost housing solutions for the increasingly displaced working class. Images of the insufferable Avery haunted the back of my mind each time I put pen to paper on these lofty ideas. How she had weaponized her charms and affluent background for such mercenary, destructive ends alongside Martin. Where she saw only dollar signs, I aimed to cultivate a revitalized sense of community and public good. Perhaps that's why, a little over a year after the dust settled on my revenge plot, I decided to undergo one final confrontation when fate brought Avery and I face to face again. I'd been strolling home from an outreach center meetup, proudly wearing one of the branded t-shirts sporting their Fostering Futures slogan. A familiar svelte figure in haute couture emerged from a nearby artisanal coffee shop, eyes downcast, lips pursed sadly. At first, I didn't recognize the disheveled, hollow-cheeked brunette, not until she met my curious stare and her eyes blew wide in shock. "You," she hissed in a tone dripping condemnation and fear. Clutching her handbag close like a lifeline, poor little rich girl Avery began backpedaling away in blatant self-preservation. "Oh, God, please, you have to understand. I never thought things would spiral so far out of control with Martin. It was all just a stupid, childish game to me until—" "Save it," I cut her rambling short with an icy glare. The sight of the woman who had selfishly and casually helped uproot my life sparked a fresh tinge of revulsion. "Your sordid little affair caused enough misery and destruction. I have no interest in whatever half-baked rationalizations you've concocted to absolve your sins." She flinched, eyes downcast, but seemed to steel herself with a slow, steadying breath. "Then let me take this chance to apologize. Truly and sincerely. What we did to you, what I enabled Martin to do through my foolishness, it was unforgivably cruel and wrong. I'll regret my role in it for the rest of my days." My jaw clenched as a fresh wave of memories resurfaced. The heated screams, the scalding tears, all the anguish and carefully cultivated vengeance that had once consumed me so completely. Staring at this wisp of a woman with the audacity to seek even an ounce of absolution, I felt an unfamiliar chill of indifference. No catharsis, no fiery anger, not even pity for her fallen status and circumstances. Nothing. "You're right, it was cruel," I said simply, already beginning to turn away. "But I've moved on to much better things now, positive things that will impact the world in meaningful ways beyond just the two of us." For a moment, Avery looked as though she wanted to speak further, but an invisible current seemed to sweep through me, imparting a deep truth. This woman held no more power over my serenity or future. The slate had been wiped clean on that sordid chapter of my life, replaced and redirected towards nobler pursuits. To even continue wasting breath acknowledging Avery's part in it would only serve to stain that progress. So without another word, I simply brushed past the ghostly relic from my traumatic past, leaving her broken spirit and desperate need for closure behind to slowly wither on its own. Just another hazy shadow fading further into my rear view with each step closer to the bright future ahead. The bustle of eager young voices greeted me as I strode into the 4-person family outreach center one sunny afternoon a year later. A fresh swell of pride bubbled up as I took in all the vibrant murals and youth activism posters lining the halls. As promised, this sanctuary had grown to become my true life's work, providing disadvantaged children and teens a secure springboard to educational opportunities, creative outlets, and positive peer role models that could set the tone for success. Things I had tried so hard to foster each day teaching at the local high school before Martin's lies derailed my life. "Hey, Miss 4-person, over here!" An excited chorus of greetings snapped me back to the present. Over at the center's front desk, a lively gaggle of student volunteers were gathered around a monitor. Teens I immediately recognized from the culinary and graphic design tracks we offered. "We're just putting the final tweaks on the new logo and slogan treatments for our upcoming outreach rally," the program coordinator explained with an infectious grin, catching my curious look. All their own original creative work to help draw even more new recruits into the fold. As the vibrant display concepts blossomed across the screen, each more colorful and compelling than the last, I couldn't help but beam with pride. This kind of grassroots, civically engaged expression was exactly the empowering mission I'd had in mind when dreaming up the center in the aftermath of my divorce. "Phenomenal work, everyone," I praised warmly to a chorus of cheers and high fives. Each unique emblem, emblazoned with the ideals of growth, community, and hope, punched straight to my core. This was living, breathing proof that community goodwill and equity could blossom even in the unlikeliest of places, that rising up to fight for a brighter future was as simple as fostering the right support systems and spark. It was a sobering reminder of just how far I'd come since that nightmare chapter with Martin first began. My marriage of nearly a decade, gone in one fell swoop of betrayal and self-destruction. But from those ashes, an even deeper commitment to raising up those around me had taken firm root and bloomed, not to mention a steely resolve in fighting for a more just, equitable society where the callous, unchecked hunger of greed and exploitation held less sway. As I circulated the room, trading jokes and insights with the beaming teens, it felt so utterly freeing to let my guarded walls down and simply connect. Mentor and be mentored in turn. Strive for a cause greater than any singular person or material gain. Could this level of open, honest exuberance have flourished if the vicious downward spiral of my former marriage had never occurred? Perhaps not. But looking back, I found less and less time afforded to such melancholic thoughts. That life had burned to embers. This, the service and human connections fostered every day in this thriving community hub, was my reinvigorated reality now. My family, my future. "There's someone to see you, Miss 4-person," the program coordinator called out with an easy grin, gesturing to the front lobby. "I think he's hoping to, enroll in some of our services, if you catch my drift." I whipped around in confusion, only to pause as the figure stepped inside. There stood Martin, visibly aged beyond his years and haggard in ill-fitting clothes. Haunted eyes roamed the vibrant space in a mixture of awe and trepidation, as if marveling at an alien landscape. For a long stretch we simply drank in the sight of one another from opposite ends. Him, a shell of a man utterly broken and exiled from mainstream society. Me, a pillar of communal pride and compassion whose life had only begun anew after burying his toxic influence. Not even the faintest ghost of our former lives together flickered behind his pitiful gaze. Just hollow shame and, if I squinted hard enough, perhaps the faintest glimmer of plea for atonement. It was a far cry from the arrogant, callous lout who had so easily dishonored our marriage vows to chase blind arrogance and material gain. Now he looked every bit the wretch, stripped bare, humbled down to the very bone with nowhere left to hide his sins. As if auditioning one final desperate time for my forgiveness and reprieve. A harsh, bitter chuckle bubbled up from my chest before I could contain it. Poor, pathetic Martin, still so utterly blind to the mountain of growth and positive change that had reshaped my life, while he was left with nothing but solitary pain and regret. Glancing back over my shoulder to the sea of bright, shining faces, my hand reached out instinctively to clasp one of the student volunteers' shoulders. This life, this promise for countless inspired tomorrows still waiting to unfold. How could I consider for even a moment sacrificing all of that tranquility for such a hollow, draining presence? Are you here to enroll, mister? I asked carefully, baiting the hook, though my voice remained disarmingly level and almost amused. Looking to join us in our mission to help build stronger families and civic involvement in the community? For a moment, Martin's mouth worked soundlessly, searching for words. Then at last, a brusque shake of his grizzled head. No, his voice cracked, graveled from some darker vice or self-neglect. Just to speak with you, if you'd even have me after. The sentence trailed off, but I recognized the silent plea underlining his request all too well. One final bid to unburden himself of regret and sin from the target of his worst transgressions. One last foolish hope at reparation for the sake of his own desiccated soul. Smiling sadly, I squeezed the youth's shoulder once more. Sorry, but you and I have no business to attend to. Not anymore. Martin's face fell as I leaned in conspiratorially towards the other volunteers. Let's double-check our security protocols first chance we get, yeah? I'd hate for an unstable vagrant lingering nearby to disrupt the good work we've got firing on all cylinders here. Crestfallen but seemingly unsurprised, Martin simply stared on as the once familiar woman he'd trashed issued her final dismissal. No emotion registered in those dead eyes, just a shade of a man left adrift. Come on, everyone, I called out brightly, leading the way down the corridor in the opposite direction. Why don't we adjourn to the media center and take a crack at our mission statement redesigns next, As the team eagerly followed my lead, a cavalcade of bright smiles and cheery banter overtook the hall. The brief, hollow detour into my harrowing past already banished to make way for vibrant new horizons. Martin never did react. By the time I chanced a single glance backwards, his solitary figure had already slunk out the front doors, possibly to wallow another lifetime, never to cross my plane again. I felt nothing as he departed. No joy at his surrender, no sorrow at his despair, just a queer, dull ambivalence. The man now existed as little more than a ghost to me, faded and decrepit, his miserable specter incapable of tainting my hard-won bliss, even if given 1,000 more aimless attempts. That hollowed-out, broken husk wasn't my concern anymore. Never again. My path forward only contained room for the radiant futures ahead. Building up those bright flames of potential into a world-shaking roar was the only quest left worthy of this strange, wonderful second life of mine. And as I slipped into the media center among a roaring chorus of creative discussion and passionate ideas, the echo of Martin's pitiful existence was forgotten anew, just a bad dream slipping further into the rear view, fading out from reality with each fresh step embracing the light. You've reached Lena. Please leave a message. Beep, Lena. I froze, nearly dropping my phone when I heard Rick's slurred speech. Why was my soon-to-be ex-husband calling me at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday? I screwed up real bad, Lena. I need you to know something. He rambled on drunkenly. I looked over at my 13-year-old daughter Zoe sitting next to me on my parents' couch. We were halfway through our movie night sleepover when he called. Who is it, Mom? Zoe asked, pausing the movie. It's your dad, sweetie. I need to take this outside for a minute. Stay here, I said, attempting to keep my voice even. I stepped out onto the front porch and took a deep breath. What do you want, Rick? I asked sharply. He paused before answering bluntly. Kara's pregnant. I staggered back against the porch railing like I'd been slapped. Kara, the woman he left me for 6 months ago, was pregnant with his child. My ears rang as the revelation sank in. I had my suspicions about his relationship, but it was still a staggering betrayal. As I struggled to process this news, Zoe opened the front door. Mom, is everything okay? She started before seeing the pained look on my face. I quickly composed myself. Everything's fine, sweetie. Your dad had some news he needed to share, I said vaguely, attempting to shield her. Sensing my despair, Zoe wrapped her arms around me comfortingly for a few moments, until I gathered the strength to head back inside. I took a deep breath and asked coldly, I assume Kara knows you're married with a child then? Rick hesitated. No, I haven't told her everything yet, but I will, he added defensively. I sighed disgustedly. Even now he was continuing his web of lies. Rick rambled at me desperately for a few more minutes before I cut him off sharply. Enjoy your new life then, I said scathingly before hanging up. When I returned inside, Zoe was sitting on the couch with a concerned look on her kind face. At only 13, she had maturity beyond her years. I sat down and pulled her close. As she rested her head on my shoulder comfortingly, I knew I had to tell her. Sweetie, your dad called to tell me. Kara is going to have a baby, I revealed gently. Zoe stiffened next to me, processing what I just shared. I know this is painful news, honey, but I promise, no matter what, we'll get through this together, I said, holding her tighter. Zoe looked up at me, her eyes glistening slightly. I'm so sorry, Mom, she said quietly. Seeing the wisdom and resilience in her face in that moment grounded me. I knew then I would do whatever necessary to protect my daughter and our future. Rick's selfishness would not break us. I pulled Zoe into my arms as we comforted each other late into the night. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight we still had each other. The next morning, I slowly opened my eyes, momentarily forgetting the anguish from Rick's late-night call. Zoe was still sleeping peacefully beside me, as pale dawn light filtered into my childhood bedroom. As the fog of sleep lifted, the harsh reality set back in. Rick was having a baby with another woman. I sighed heavily and pulled myself out of bed, careful not to disturb Zoe. Over a strong cup of coffee, I began making plans. I would need to find an apartment for Zoe and I immediately. I refused to uproot Zoe from her school and friends. Rick would just have to move out of our family home instead. I also emailed my divorce lawyer requesting an emergency meeting. I needed to formally document Rick's latest betrayal in case he tried denying it later. As I was typing, I heard light footsteps behind me. Morning, Mom, Zoe mumbled, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. Morning, sweetie, I replied, attempting a smile. Zoe studied my face. So it wasn't just a bad dream then? She asked quietly. I sighed, gesturing for Zoe to come sit with me at the table. I grasped her hand tightly. No, honey, it wasn't a dream, but we're going to get through this. Zoe nodded, determination in her young eyes. Can I help with the apartment search today? I squeezed her hand, my heart swelling with love and pride. Of course you can. We're in this together. Over the next week, Zoe and I explored rental options between her school days and activities. With her input, we selected a small but cozy apartment less than a mile from her school. Zoe loved its corner unit location and spacious bedrooms. I also had an illuminating meeting with my lawyer, Julia. She informed me that if I filed my paperwork strategically, I could potentially claim financial damages from Rick due to his adultery and imminent new child. This is brutal, but it's necessary you protect yourself here, Julia advised bluntly. Document every interaction with Rick moving forward. I left Julia's office with renewed focus. I refused to let Rick destroy the stable home Zoe and I had built. If it took legal action to guarantee our financial future, so be it. I would do anything for my daughter, even leverage Rick's cruelest betrayal against him. Over the next few weeks, Zoe and I slowly settled into our new apartment routine. Underneath our determined exteriors, though, grief lingered. Sometimes after Zoe went to bed, I let the tears fall, mourning all Rick had callously broken. But Zoe needed me to be strong. So each morning, I picked myself up and continued building our new life, brick by difficult brick. And slowly, the pain began to recede. Today, we were going to pick up the last small boxes from the old house while Rick was at work. I steeled my nerves as we pulled into that once familiar driveway, focusing solely on quickly grabbing our things. This was just a pit stop before Zoe and I continued speeding towards our new beginning, fueled by resilience and just a hint of revenge. A few days later, I sat staring blankly at my laptop screen. My eyes kept drifting to the manila envelope sitting ominously on the corner of my desk. Inside were photos of Rick, seeming to depict a close relationship with his pretty young assistant. They were innocuous so far, shots of them having coffee together, walking and smiling after work events. But the implications were clear. My investigator friend Kara had taken the photos over the past month, tracking Rick's interactions with his assistant, Nina. She also provided detailed records of Rick's past credit issues and questionable business expenses. I leaned back with a heavy sigh, sadness washing over me. Our marriage meant so little to Rick that he began seeking out Nina before we were even divorced. My sadness quickly transformed into anger. Not at Nina. She seemed oblivious thus far to Rick's web of lies. No, my fury was directed solely at my selfish, philandering husband. If Rick wasn't willing to honor our marriage vows, then I no longer owed him discretion either. I suddenly realized I now had the means to strategically introduce turmoil into Rick's life. If I anonymously provided Nina documented proof of Rick's serial manipulation and lies, their budding relationship would certainly implode. And who knows what would happen if I tipped off his employer about Rick's shady financial dealings over the years. They likely wouldn't react well to fraud allegations. As an ethical, law-abiding woman, these vengeful ideas should have given me pause. But I was far beyond playing fair with Rick at this point. He had already demolished any integrity or good faith between us. After Rick's latest betrayal, I was determined to protect myself and Zoe at any cost. If that meant leveraging Rick's misdeeds against him, then so be it. Over the next few days, I discreetly compiled documentation of Rick's most questionable financial decisions and emails clearly showing his overly close work friendship with Nina. I typed up an anonymous letter to accompany the evidence packet, highlighting Rick's deceitful nature in business and marriage. This would clearly demonstrate to Nina that her charming, attentive boss was manipulating yet another unsuspecting woman. I knew the revelation would shock and deeply hurt Nina once she connected all the lies. But she deserved to know the truth about Rick before their relationship went any further. I was doing her a favor in the long run. At least that's what I told myself as I printed the letter and packaged everything for mailing. This was mere retribution, I reasoned, for the emotional agony Rick forced Zoe and I to endure. The day I dropped that fateful package in the mail, I drove home with hands shaking slightly. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, almost expecting Rick to be following me, having somehow uncovered my vengeful plot already. But as the days passed with no reaction from Rick, I relaxed slightly. Clearly Nina hadn't directly accused Rick yet, though undoubtedly the seed of suspicion was planted. Soon, I mailed a similar anonymous package to the ethics division at Rick's company. Those records documented inconsistent expense reports, questionable payments, and opaque financial transfers over the years. If Rick thought I would fade quietly into the background, allowing his lies and manipulation to continue unchecked, he was sorely mistaken. The revenge campaign was just getting started. Over the next few weeks, I scrutinized Rick from afar, looking for any cracks in his polished veneer. But outwardly, his life seemed utterly unaffected. He still met Nina for semi-regular coffee dates, and apparently no ethics investigation had been formally launched at his company yet. I tapped my foot impatiently, eager for my revenge plot to take effect. Then late one night, as I was catching up on work emails, an unknown number flashed across my phone screen. I hesitated, then tapped answer. "Hello?" I said cautiously. Hi, is this Lena?" a female voice asked timidly. "Yes, may I ask who's calling?" The woman cleared her throat nervously. "This is Nina, Rick's friend. Your name and photo were in a rather unsettling package I received recently," she said carefully. I sat up straighter. My anonymously sourced dossier must have raised alarms after all. "I see. How can I help you, Nina?" I asked politely, keeping any trace of satisfaction from my voice. Well, the package contained quite concerning records and emails indicating Rick hasn't been honest about a few things. I was hoping you could clarify some of this information since you know Rick more intimately," Nina said delicately. "Gotcha, Rick." I smiled to myself. Outwardly, though, I kept my tone serious. "I'm afraid you'd have to ask Rick directly about his personal business dealings. I signed confidentiality agreements around our divorce preventing me from discussing such matters," I lied smoothly. Nina sighed. "Yes, but according to these records, Rick has a history of manipulative behavior in both his career and marriage. This led me to question if he's been honest with me as well." Her voice broke slightly. I stayed silent, letting Nina connect the dots herself about Rick's deceitful nature. My lack of argument would speak volumes. After a weighty pause, Nina continued softly. I guess what I'm really asking is, do you think Rick started our relationship before he ended things officially with you? Bingo. I had her exactly where I wanted her. Nina was now suspicious enough about Rick's character to directly question his integrity. I cleared my throat delicately. Again, Nina, you'd have to take that up with Rick. Now if there's nothing else. I trailed off pointedly. No, I'm sorry to have bothered you, Lena. Nina sighed defeatedly. I appreciate you speaking with me regardless. Take care, she added politely before hanging up. I set down my phone with a satisfied smile. Even if I didn't outright confirm Rick's misdeeds, my responses undoubtedly compounded Nina's doubts. Let her rip Rick's deceitful web apart herself. Over the next few weeks, I noticed Nina looked more strained and distant around Rick at public work events I happened to observe. Soon after, Rick showed up on my doorstep unannounced one evening, rage simmering beneath his controlled exterior. My revenge plot was working perfectly. Now to let Rick sabotage himself, while I watched karma unfold with pleasure. I peered through the door's peephole before slowly opening it. Evening, Rick, I said coolly, blocking his access. To what do I owe this surprise visit? Rick's jaw clenched, his genial mask slipping. I think you know exactly why I'm here, he bit out. Over the last few weeks, both my job and relationship have gone to hell, and I'm willing to bet anything you're involved. I raised my eyebrows, feigning confusion. Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that, Rick, but I can assure you, I have nothing to do with your personal affairs these days, I replied breezily. Cut the crap, Lena, Rick snarled. Misleading documents just happened to anonymously land on my girlfriend and employer's desks, destroying credibility. What a coincidence, given our current divorce proceedings. I glared back unfazed by his temper. I suggest you watch your tone. Unless you have tangible proof of these allegations? I asked coolly. Rick huffed frustratedly. You may have covered your tracks, but I know your moralistic little fingerprints are all over this. You've always been petty and self-righteous. My, Rick, getting desperate now, are we? I scoffed. Grasping at straws to pin unrelated events on your nearly ex-wife? I have better things to do than obsess over your melodramas. We built a 20-year life together, Lena, and you're just fine watching it burn? Rick asked bitterly. You burned our marriage to the ground yourself last year, Rick, I said sharply. I've simply been trying to build something new from the wreckage. Any cracks emerging now are consequences of your own deceptions. Rick opened and closed his mouth indignantly, at a loss for how to redirect blame solely back on me. I sighed, leaning warily against the doorframe. Now, unless you have anything pertinent to discuss about our daughter, I believe this conversation has run its course, I said with finality. Rick glared balefully at me for a few moments before spinning sharply and stomping back to his car without another word. I watched his taillights fade into the night with vindictive satisfaction. Let him marinate in self-inflicted paranoia over failing work and relationship prospects. Meanwhile, Zoe was thriving. She made honor roll again this quarter and started a humble jewelry business she managed mostly online. Who was that mom? She asked when I returned inside. No one important, sweetie, I assured, kissing the top of her head where she sat doing homework. Zoe glanced up at me curiously, but didn't press the issue. She learned long ago involving herself too deeply in adult affairs only led to hurt. I squeezed Zoe's shoulder affectionately before heading to my bedroom, a slight smile playing over my lips. My revenge plot was succeeding perfectly. Soon Rick would crash and burn. In the meantime, Zoe and I would continue building our peaceful life, heads held high. The contrast grew starker by the day between her steady resilience and Rick's floundering lies. Karma had arrived right on schedule. Over the next few months, I watched with growing satisfaction as Rick's life unraveled spectacularly. Soon after his enraged visit, Rick's employer formally launched an ethics investigation focused on several key executives, including Rick. The day I glimpsed Rick storming red-faced from the CEO's office, I knew heads would start rolling. Sure enough, a week later, Rick found himself unemployed after over 15 years with the company. Turns out corporations don't appreciate mid-level managers misrepresenting financial records for personal gain. The day Rick boxed up his office, I drove by long enough to watch security escort him briskly from the building. His cropped hair couldn't quite hide his burning ears as whispers from former colleagues followed his perp walk of shame to the parking lot. At home, Rick's situation deteriorated further once Nina discovered she wasn't the only other woman occupying his time and empty promises. Even I was surprised when Kara uncovered Rick had been stringing along yet another young administrative assistant for months. Nina soon gathered the remnants of her dignity and cut Rick completely out of her life. She had plenty of sordid evidence regarding Rick's serial manipulation and lies to inoculate her against his sweet talk. I almost felt sorry watching Rick pathetically chase after her for weeks, his desperation growing more palpable each day. Almost, but not quite. They both fully deserved the misery this unraveling caused. In the meantime, Zoe flourished in her new school and part-time job. Though still soft-spoken, her inner strength and savvy shone through more each day. She had handled recent challenges with a grace far exceeding her 14 years. I made sure to frequently verbalize how proud I was at Zoe's resilience. "My college savings is growing, Mom, but I keep adding to savings too for our family trip to Japan next summer," she told me cheerfully one evening. My heart swelled listening to Zoe eagerly outline travel plans she researched herself. Rick's absence barely even registers for her anymore. In his place stood a mature, thoughtful young woman wise beyond her years. Rick clearly recognized Zoe's glowing development as well. One day I exited the courthouse after yet another tedious divorce hearing to find Rick loitering outside. His belongings now occupied the extended stay motel visible over his shoulder across the street. Seeing me, Rick shuffled over pathetically. "Lena, wait," he pleaded, reeking of stale cigarettes and regret. "I just want to talk about Zoe. Isn't there any way for us to be a family again?" I looked at him levelly. "You decided our family wasn't a priority last year, Rick. We're moving forward on our own path now. Goodbye." I briskly turned towards my car without a backward glance. Rick didn't try stopping me this time. We both knew the chasm now gaping between my bright new future and his crumbled kingdom was permanent and irreparable. Settling into my driver's seat, I glimpsed Rick's shattered silhouette staring after me through the rearview mirror until I turned the corner. Then his forlorn shadow disappeared from view as I drove steadily onward towards home. Over the next few months, Rick grew increasingly desperate, his life now in shambles. He drove by Zoe's school, hoping to see her. He loitered outside my office, begging for loans to pay overdue bills. He even showed up at my parents' house once pathetically drunk, raving about reconciliation. I remained resolutely indifferent to these antics, refusing to rescue Rick from the bed he made. Inside, though, I'll admit his raging meltdowns secretly thrilled me. His downward spiral was the ultimate vengeance for years of callous manipulation. But desperate people make stupid decisions. And one day, Rick showed up on my doorstep waving legal documents, eyes bloodshot and jumping with paranoia. "You won't get away with trying to ruin me, Lena. I'm suing you for defamation regarding the ethics investigation that cost me my career." Rick spat viciously. I simply stared back impassively. "You sure you want to pursue this, Rick?" I asked softly. "Because discovery will delve into both our backgrounds quite extensively. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" Rick laughed harshly at my veiled warning about his own shady history. "Nice try, Lena, but I know the law. My lawyer says this is a solid case," he sneered. "Get ready for a legal battle." Sure enough, a courier soon arrived with Rick's official lawsuit, accusing me of providing his employer falsified records to influence their investigation. But I wasn't worried. I had documented all my strategic revenge plans and alibis meticulously in my password-protected journal at home. "Bring it on, Rick. Let's publicly drag every skeleton from our marriage out of the closet once and for all." At my lawyer's advice, I countersued for Rick's unpaid child support from the last few months. "This ensures we can fully investigate his employment situation and shady finances," Julia explained confidently. "Rick strategically quit his job but likely has hidden income he's living on, so discovery should uncover tax evasion too." And uncover it did. Over months of exhaustive investigation, records exposed the full depth of Rick's long-running duplicity. Undeclared bank accounts emerged showing he embezzled money from previous jobs. Past Venmo exchanges indicated he was selling black-market knockoff designer accessories. Even Zoe's college fund showed suspicious withdrawals that Rick couldn't explain. The awful truth, unraveling, crushed me again temporarily. I cried many bitter tears over how profoundly our entire marriage had been a lie. Rick proved himself a pathological liar with zero remorse for the destruction caused. I didn't even fully recognize this monster anymore. But Zoe helped bolster my resolve once more. "Don't worry about me or Dad anymore, Mom. I'm focusing all my energy on my future goals, not his issues," she said firmly, hugging me close late one difficult night. Her words reminded me how far we had come thanks to removing Rick's toxicity from our lives for good. Sure enough, the lengthy court case left Rick utterly exposed and defeated. The judge ordered him to repay the missing money for Zoe's college fund with interest and provide 6 months of overdue child support immediately to avoid jail time. His reputation lay in tatters. Meanwhile, Zoe thrived through it all. "We're the only family I need," she whispered supportively as we embraced, finally free from Rick's shattered remains. I had shielded my daughter from her father's destructive web. Now we could build our lives on truth rather than lies moving forward. Over the next year, Zoe and I carefully rebuilt our lives brick by difficult brick. After the court ruled fully in my favor, I invested a portion of the substantial settlement money in long-term savings bonds for Zoe's education. I used the rest to purchase a cozy bungalow near Zoe's high school. I was also ready for a professional reboot after the emotional roller coaster with Rick. I accepted an executive role with a thriving tech startup I admired. The work was engaging, my colleagues talented, and for the first time in ages, I looked forward to each new week. Zoe continued excelling in school while also working part-time at a jewelry boutique. She expanded the customized accessory line she designed herself last year into a legitimate home business. I displayed Zoe's unique beaded bracelets and necklaces proudly whenever we hosted game nights or study groups at our house. Seeing Zoe blossom creatively, now that she was finally free from the shadows of Rick's emotional manipulation, filled me with profound joy and gratitude. My shy yet wise daughter was spreading her wings at last. Bit by bit, we healed further and found brighter paths forward. Of course, no amount of legal justice or financial security could fully erase the betrayal trauma Rick burdened us with. Occasionally, I awoke breathless from nightmares where I had to take the witness stand again, publicly reliving each excruciating detail. And some days the weight of single parenting threatened to crush my spirit, no matter how independent Zoe grew. But during those times of doubt, I remembered the promise I made Zoe, that we would build the life we wanted, without limitations from Rick's toxicity, just us two against the world. On especially depressing days, Zoe would make us sugar cookie hot chocolate, and together we'd watch Gilmore Girls reruns, reminiscing about better times ahead. In those quiet moments, hope returned once more. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a year after the court settlement, Zoe and I pulled up to my parents' house for our usual family dinner. We came bearing 2 trays of Zoe's latest confection experiment, salted honey tarts. As we relaxed in the familiar comfort of my childhood kitchen later, catching up over steaming mugs of tea, I felt all the broken fragments inside me shift seamlessly into place at last. Here, surrounded by the people I loved most, reflecting on the insane journey that delivered us safely here, I made peace with even the most painful parts of my past, because every jagged crack, every scar left by Rick's cold betrayal, brought me and Zoe infinitely closer. Our alliance glowing brightly before me now was unbreakable. No matter what else crumbled in this world, Zoe and I would stand tall, side by side. The sound of Leon's car pulling into the driveway made my heart sink into my stomach. It was 3 a.m. Again, I had been laying awake for hours, my mind racing with dread about where he had been so late. When he finally came through the door, I was already standing in the living room waiting for him. "Where the hell have you been?" I demanded, trying and failing to keep my voice from shaking with anger and fear. Leon jumped a little, clearly not expecting me to be up. "Geez, Marla, you scared me. I was just out with the guys from work, that's all." His eyes avoided mine as he spoke. "Don't lie to me," I shouted, the hurt and rage boiling over. "I called Dave's wife earlier and she said he's been home since 10 p.m. Leon's face flushed red. "So what? A man can't go out without getting the 3rd degree? We agreed you would stop this. After the bank threatening to foreclose because of your gambling, you swore you were done." Tears of frustration stung my eyes. It had taken everything I had to get Leon to go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings and get his life back on track 6 months ago. But the late nights and suspicious behavior had started up again recently. I just slipped up a little. But I'm handling it, Leon said weakly. Is that what you call racking up over $20,000 in debt behind my back? I pulled out the stack of delinquency notices and letters from debt collectors that I had been receiving for weeks and threw them at his feet. These arrived from 4 different credit card companies today. Were you just going to keep lying and spend us into complete financial ruin? Leon's mouth hung open, clearly not knowing what to say. The fear and shame were plain on his face. After an agonizing minute of silence, he finally muttered, "I'm so sorry, Marla. I really did try to stop, but I just got pulled back in. It's a sickness, you know." I put my hands up, rage and heartbreak mixing together in a toxic swirl of emotion. Don't give me that bullshit excuse. This is about making choices that involve risking our home, our daughter's future. The thought of how Leon's selfish actions could upend our little Lucy's life was like a kick to my gut. She was just 5 years old, innocent and caring and trusting. How could he do this to her? "You need to leave," I stated firmly, barely recognizing my own cold voice. "Get out of this house tonight, and don't come back until you've gotten real help to stop this. I can't have Lucy around this anymore." Leon opened his mouth to protest, but seemed to think better of it, his shoulders slumped in defeat. After grabbing his car keys, he turned to go without another word, shutting the door quietly behind him. In the deafening silence that followed, I felt my legs give way beneath me. I crumpled to the floor, wrapping my arms around myself as the sobs came in great heaving waves. My heart shattered into a million pieces thinking about how badly I had misjudged the man I had loved and trusted, the father of my child. How could Leon have been so weak and selfish? He was risking absolutely everything, our little family, our future, just to chase that stupid gambling high over and over again. The broken promises and blatant lies cut deepest of all. As I sat on that floor, crying in the dark stillness of our home, I tried to prepare myself for the long, difficult road ahead. Leon had shattered my heart and betrayed my trust in the worst way. But I couldn't dwell on that hurt forever. I had to protect Lucy now, no matter what it took. A righteous defiance began to burn inside me, stealing my resolve. If Leon wasn't going to man up and be the husband and father we needed, then I would have to take the reins myself. I would do whatever was necessary to get us out of this mess he created and make sure my little girl was taken care of, no matter how hard it got. That was my solemn vow as I wiped away the tears and rose to my feet, ready to face the challenges head-on. The weeks after Leon left were an exhausting juggling act. I was holding down my job as an executive assistant at the Willow Grove Family Crisis Center while also dealing with the aftermath of Leon's gambling meltdown. Credit card companies, debt collectors, and even our mortgage lender were relentlessly calling and sending letters demanding payment on the piles of debt he had recklessly accumulated. On top of that, I was now having to be both mom and dad to 5-year-old Lucy. Making sure she was fed, bathed, and gotten to and from school every day while putting in my hours at the crisis center definitely kept me run ragged. More than once I arrived late to pick up Lucy, only to find her red-eyed from crying in the after-school room. "I'm so sorry, baby. Mommy got stuck at work again," I said, hoisting her up with a tight hug. "Mrs. Franklin was just keeping you company until I could get here." Lucy pouted, her little brow furrowed. "You said you'd be here to have snacks with me this time." A lump rose in my throat, seeing the disappointment on her face that I had let her down once more. "I know, honey. I'm so sorry. But hey, how about we get McDonald's for dinner tonight?" Lucy finally cracked a small smile at that, and I reminded myself to treasure these small moments of joy wherever I could find them. On one particularly rough evening, my best friend Jenna came over after getting off work. "You look like a ghost girl," she said, taking in my haggard appearance. "When's the last time you slept?" "Honestly, I can't even remember," I sighed, pushing aside a pile of past-due bills on the coffee table to make room for us to sit. "The debt collectors keep calling at all hours, and every time Lucy cries because I'm not around, it breaks my heart all over again. This is too much for one person to handle." Jenna put a supportive hand on my arm. Marla, you've got to take care of yourself too, you know. Have you thought any more about getting a private investigator to look into Leon's activities? I shook my head. I just don't have the money for that. Not with all these debts to try and dig out from. Well, maybe I could help out with the cost, Jenna offered. Getting some real evidence of what that dirtbag has been up to could be just what you need to get out from under this mess. And never underestimate a good girlfriend when she wants to help get some sweet, sweet revenge, too. She gave me a wry smile. I forced out a small laugh, cheered slightly knowing I had Jenna in my corner. A few days later, Lucy and I were eating dinner while some ridiculous baking competition show played on the TV. My phone rang and I saw it was Jenna calling. Hello? Marla, you're not going to believe what my PI buddy found out. I quickly muted the TV so Lucy wouldn't hear, my stomach turning over anxiously. What did he say? Well, for starters, it looks like Leon has been going to a couple different casinos outside the city every week. Belmark Downs and Riverside Grand are the two main ones. My mouth went dry imagining Leon shoving piles of our money right into the slots like a brainless zombie. I gripped the phone tightly. Oh my God! That's not even the worst of it, Jenna continued. He's also been siphoning money directly out of your bank accounts and taking out loans in your name to fund this. The PI got records showing over $50,000 has been drained from your joint savings and checking over the past 6 months. And that's on top of all the credit card debt already, too. It was as if the wind had been knocked clear out of me. I lowered myself into a chair, trying to suppress the fury and panic rising in my chest. How could he do this to us? To Lucy? I took a few steadying breaths. Please tell me you have proof of all this. Oh, don't you worry, girl. He's got bank statements, photos, the works. We can bury that son of a bitch, but good. I glanced over at Lucy, happily humming to herself while eating her chicken nuggets, blessedly unaware of the turmoil erupting in my life. Righteous anger surged through me like adrenaline. A fierce protectiveness over my daughter solidified my determination. Well then, let's do it. Let's take that bastard down. A few days later, Jenna came over again with a large manila envelope. Got those documents from the PI for you, she said grimly, handing it over. I took the stuffed envelope from her with trembling hands, almost afraid to open it and confront the full depths of Leon's betrayal. Steeling myself, I tore it open and began rifling through the contents. Bank statements, credit reports, surveillance photos of Leon at the casinos, and even some grainy video footage that must have been from ATM cameras at the bank. I felt nauseous looking at the bottomless pit of gambling transactions and ballooning interest charges spreading like a cancer throughout our finances. Jenna was right. It was even worse than I imagined. Leon had been ruthlessly pillaging every account and credit line in my name to feed his sick addiction over the past 6 months. There's got to be over $80,000 in debt listed here, I said weakly, my legs feeling like jelly. Jenna slammed her hand down on the coffee table, startling me. That worthless sack of crap. He's been lying and stealing from you like a parasite this whole time. Just then, Lucy came wandering in from her bedroom wearing her Paw Patrol pajamas, rubbing her eyes sleepily. Hey, Munchkin, did we wake you up? Jenna asked in a gentler tone. Lucy shook her head and made her way over to me. What's wrong, Mommy? Why are you mad? I quickly tried to collect myself and plaster on a reassuring smile, shoving aside all the damning evidence spread out in front of me. It's nothing, baby, I said, wrapping her up in a big hug and kissing the top of her head. You just go ahead back to bed, and I'll come tuck you in soon, okay? Lucy nodded obediently and toddled off back to her room, once again, blissfully unaware of the turmoil threatening to unravel our little family. As soon as she was out of earshot, Jenna exploded again. Can you believe this cockroach? He spent years betraying you, betraying his own freaking daughter. And for what? Losing all your money at those fleabag casinos again and again like some zombie with a death wish? I was trembling with rage, Jenna's words echoing the roiling storm of anger and hurt rampaging inside me. But I pushed it down, knowing my emotions couldn't be allowed to spiral out of control. Not with Lucy just down the hall. You're absolutely right, I said, trying to keep my voice even and steady. What Leon's done is beyond despicable. It's unforgivable. I began gathering up the documents and shoving them roughly back into the envelope. But I'm not going to let his sickness destroy us. I've got to stay strong, for Lucy's sake if nothing else. I'm going to make things right. Jenna nodded firmly, her own eyes flashing with determination. That low-life asshole has to pay big time for what he's put you and Lucy through. Let's bury him with all this proof of what a lying, cheating bastard he really is. Don't worry, I said, gritting my teeth and cinching the envelope shut. If he thinks he can wriggle out of taking responsibility for what he's done, he's sadly mistaken. My mind was already racing, plotting how to ensure Leon faced the consequences he deserved. This went far beyond lies and broken promises. He had stolen from me, stolen my family's financial security and future without a second thought. There would be no forgiveness for a betrayal that deep. As I gazed around at our cozy living room, my eyes landing on framed photos of happier times before Leon's destructive choices shattered everything, a cold feeling of grim acceptance spread through me. The life I thought I had was over. There was no going back from this. Justice would be brutal, implacable, and entirely of my own remaking. Leon was going to regret the day he ever took his loving, devoted wife for granted. A few days later, I finally worked up the nerve to call Leon and tell him to come over to the house. I needed to confront him with the mountain of evidence I now had proving his deceit. When he pulled up in his beat-up sedan, I was already waiting on the front porch, my arms crossed tightly. He got out of the car looking disheveled and hungover as usual. "Hey, baby, you said you wanted to talk?" he slurred out, barely able to meet my icy stare. I was sickened just looking at his pathetic, bloated face. Without a word, I shoved the overstuffed manila envelope into his chest, letting the weight of it nearly knock him off balance. "What the hell is this?" he grunted, struggling to grip the heavy load of documents. "Take a good look," I said through gritted teeth. "It's rock-solid proof of what a lying, degenerate piece of garbage you've been." Leon's eyes went wide as he began rifling through the bank statements, credit reports, and photos of him hunched over casino machines like a mindless zombie. The color drained from his face. "Baby, I can explain." "Explain what, you miserable snake?" I shouted, years of anger and hurt bubbling over. "How you've been stealing from me, from our daughter's future, while lying to my face over and over again?" Leon recoiled from the force of my rage, shrinking back like a whipped dog. "I never meant to hurt you guys," he muttered weakly. "I just got in too deep with the debts and had to keep trying to win it back." "You selfish bastard!" I cut him off. "Lucy is 5 years old and has had to watch her own father fritter away everything providing for her. Have you lost your damn mind?" Leon tried to reach out and touch my arm, but I smacked his hand away forcefully. "Don't you dare try and play the victim here," I growled. We stood in tense silence for a moment, Leon seemingly at a complete loss for words in the face of his shameful exposure. I took a few deep breaths, trying to regain control. "This is what's going to happen," I said in a low, measured tone that almost surprised me with its deadliness. "You are going to go check yourself into a real rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. For at least 6 months. No exceptions." Leon opened his mouth to protest, but I held up my hand to silence him. "You're also going to turn over every single cent you have in banks accounts, stocks, bonds, everything. It all goes into paying back what you stole me and our daughter, and you're getting a job the second you get out of rehab to pay back the rest." I leaned in close, barely able to stand the sight of his crestfallen face contorted in shame and fear. "If you do those things, if you make a full, genuine effort to get better and be a real man for once in your worthless life, then maybe, just maybe, I'll consider letting you try and be a part of Lucy's life again someday." Tears were streaming down Leon's cheeks, but I felt utterly unmoved. His weeping son act was far too little, far too late. "But so help me God, if you fail to do any of that, I will take you for everything you're worth. The only time you'll see our daughter is in court-approved visits. And I'll make sure the whole world knows what a pathetic, irresponsible, degenerate scumbag you've been this whole time." I stepped back, letting my ultimatum hang heavy in the tense air. Leon stared at me wide-eyed and broken. "Well?" I shouted, making him flinch. "What's it gonna be? Get clean and try to make amends? Or let the self-destruction continue until you hit rock bottom alone?" After an agonizing moment of silence, Leon gave a small, defeated nod. Okay, I'll do it. For real this time, I swear. Whatever you want, Marla. I eyed him warily, not allowing any shred of pity to break through my steely reserve. We'll see. Now get off my property before I call the police and have you trespassed. Leon turned and began trudging back to his car, clutching the envelope of evidence to his chest like piece of his own shattered soul. As I watched him peel away from the curb, I whispered to myself with grim satisfaction. That's just the opening salvo, asshole. You have no idea what kind of revenge is coming for you if you screw this up. After my confrontation with Leon, I thought I could finally start getting our lives back on track. I doubled down on my hours at the crisis center, working overtime as much as possible to start replenishing our drained savings. We had to drastically cut back on expenses. No more eating out, bargain grocery shopping, and lots of nights cuddled up watching movies on the couch instead of going out. But through it all, Lucy was a trooper. That little girl was my rock, all smiles and affection, despite our humbling new circumstances. She never complained about the cheap dinners or not having fancy toys anymore. Her sweet resilience was my driving force to persevere. Then about a month later, I got an alarming call from my mother. Marla, are you all right, dear? Your father and I are so worried about you. What are you talking about, Mom? I'm fine, I said, furrowing my brow in confusion. Well, we just spoke to Leon last night and he told us about your condition, she said hesitantly. Said you've been struggling with some sort of mental breakdown. My blood turned to ice in my veins. That stupid, vindictive son of a bitch. He said what? I growled through gritted teeth. Oh, I'm so sorry, Marla, my mom continued. We had no idea you were going through such a tough time. Leon said you've been irrational and delusional, lashing out at him for no good reason. I stopped listening, shaking with unbridled rage. That miserable worm was trying to turn my own family against me, smearing my name by painting himself as the victim, no doubt to wiggle out of the consequences I had promised him. When I hung up with my mom a few minutes later, I was angrier than I had ever been in my life. How dare he try and sabotage my relationships and make me look crazy? It was the ultimate insult on top of his already shameful betrayals. I spent the next couple days making calls and quickly realized Leon wasn't just lying to my parents. He had been spreading vicious rumors all across town, to our friends, his work buddies, even some of my coworkers at the crisis center. Telling everyone his scorned wife was having a mental breakdown and lashing out irrationally due to postpartum depression or some sort of psychosis. The stigmatizing lies seemingly knew no bounds. Tales of me being delusional, keeping Leonard from seeing Lucy, and even overblown stories about me threatening violence or self-harm if he didn't cede to my unhinged demands. I realized with horror that Leon was trying to completely destroy my credibility and reputation, probably hoping to turn everyone against me so that when I finally tried to take legal action, I'd look like the unstable liar. That was his endgame, to slither away like a coward without suffering any of the consequences for what he had done to our family. My fists clenched just thinking about it. One night, as I was watching Lucy play with her dolls after dinner, my sweet girl looked up at me innocently. "Mommy, is it true you're crazy and mean to Daddy?" My heart stopped in my chest. Of course the horrible rumors had even reached her youthful ears. I quickly went and knelt down next to her, half taking her little hands in mine. "No, baby? Of course not," I said, forcing a smile to mask my rage at Leon. "Those are just misunderstandings that some people are confused about. You know, Mommy would never be mean or lie, right?" Lucy nodded, seeming only partially convinced, but she was still so young and trusting. I pulled her into a fierce hug, feeling tears starting in my eyes. "I'm so sorry you got caught up in this, sweetheart," I whispered. "Mommy loves you more than anything in the world." As I held her tiny body close, feeling her warmth and pure, unconditional love for her mother, an iron resolve solidified in the pit of my soul. There would be no more Miss Nice Girl, no more trying to take the high road or handle this nightmare situation with grace and poise. Leon had shattered that notion by lashing out with sabotage and lies. If that snake wanted to wallow in the mud and fight dirty to escape his sins, then so be it. I would engage in that battle without hesitation or restraint. It was time to stop playing defense and go on the attack. No more running or hiding. From now on, I would be the unrelenting force of justice and retribution that Leon's miserable life so clearly deserved. And if ruining him publicly was the only way to finally put this demon behind me and keep Lucy safe, then that was what I would do. Failure was no longer an option. By the time I was through with Leon, he would have no choice but face the consequences of every last sin he committed. No mercy. Only righteous karma from the woman he betrayed. Over the next few weeks, I went into overdrive plotting my counterattack against Leon's smear campaign. With Jenna's help, we combed through all the evidence and paperwork from the private investigator, highlighting anything that could potentially discredit Leon and destroy what little credibility he had left. I spent hours on the phone, working my connections from the crisis center to see what kinds of legal actions and social pressures we could realistically bring to bear. It turned out the nonprofit world had a lot of experience dealing with degenerate gamblers who financially ruined their families. More than a few lawyers and social workers were willing to assist my case pro bono once they heard the harrowing details. Evidence of Leon's debts, thefts, paper trails of his habitual gambling. I meticulously organized it all into an airtight case to prove what a reprehensible liar and criminal he had become. There would be no more chances for him to play the victim here. With the help of a sharp-tongued mother from the crisis center, who went through a similar hell with her ex-husband, I even compiled damaging testimonies from some of Leon's former gambling buddies at the local underground rooms. According to them, he had a vicious temper when on a bad streak, making racist and sexist tirades while drunkenly lashing out at staff. We had it all on record. The amount of indisputable evidence I was able to assemble of Leon's countless sins was staggering. He had lied, cheated, stolen, berated every goddamn person in his life for the sake of his selfish addiction. I felt disgust just looking at the paper trail of his continual transgressions. Most damningly, I obtained ironclad financial records from the private eye, clearly showing how Leon had been steadily looting our joint accounts and asset funds for 6 months leading up to our confrontation. He had stolen nearly $100,000 from me and Lucy to gamble away without a second thought. When Jenna came over one evening and I showed her the fully assembled dossier, she let out a low whistle. "Ooh, boy, I'd hate to be Leon when you finally unleash this nuclear bomb of truth on him," she said, flipping through the pages of debt statements, home appraisal devaluations, and witness excerpts detailing Leon's degenerate exploits. "That's the point," I said with grim satisfaction. "Once I blow the lid off just how big of a lying bastard he's been, not a single person in this city will take his side. He'll be radioactive, finished in the eyes of everyone from his work pals to his asshole bookie buddies." I pulled out a notebook where I had been listing potential dates, public venues, and possible attendee lists for the ideal scenario to detonate this truth bomb. "See? The Summer Cancer Fundraiser Gala is coming up in a few weeks. That's where I can really maximize the exposure. Half the damn town will be there. It's from community leaders all the way down to their church groups and out-of-town donors." Jenna raised her eyebrows. "You sure you want to go nuclear in such a huge public arena, though? I know you're gunning to completely annihilate Leon's reputation, but doing it like that could set off a huge firestorm of drama, too." I shrugged, nodding firmly. "That's precisely why it has to be such a big stage. I want the fallout to be so catastrophic for Leon that he has zero chance of spinning it or escaping the blowback. He'll be left out in the cold to face the consequences. No more weaseling or conning his way out of trouble." I rifled through the dossier again, burning with determination. He had his chance to come clean and try salvaging our family after everything he's done. But instead that miserable snake chose to go scorched earth with vicious lies and deceit to try and turn our own friends and family against his wife and child. I slammed my fist on the table, making Jenna jump a little. "Well, now he's going to burn in the fire he started. I'm going to shatter his pathetic facade forever in front of God and everybody. Once I humiliate him with the truth on that grand stage, it'll be the nail in his coffin socially and destroy any ability to lie or manipulate ever again." Jenna nodded slowly, seeming to understand the gravity of my plan. The reckoning is going to be biblical, girlfriend. You've put in the work to bury that son of a bitch alive. Exactly, I said grimly. There will be no more hiding from karma's judgment for Leon. I'll make damn sure of that. A few weeks later, the big night of the summer cancer fundraiser gala arrived. Jenna and I spent hours making sure my appearance was perfectly put together, a classy black dress with modest heels, my makeup impeccably applied to convey strength and confidence. This was the moment I had been carefully preparing for. All the rage, hurt, and determination would finally coalesce into righteous retribution for Leon's unforgivable sins. You look like one hot mama ready to burn it all down, Jenna said approvingly as we went over my materials one last time. I clutched the thick dossier of evidence to my chest, practically able to feel the force of karma contained within. Don't worry, this will be a night that dirtbag never forgets. When we arrived at the fancy country club hosting the gala, the parking lot was unsurprisingly jam-packed with high-end luxury cars and limousines. All the social elite had turned out in full force. My mouth tightened into a grim line, realizing Leon was likely already inside, drinking away our money while hobnobbing with fellow scumbags and philanderers. But those willfully ignorant days of keeping up appearances were about to be obliterated. Tonight, I would pull back the curtain for everyone to see just what a venomous snake they had allowed into their midst. Inside, the lavish ballroom was indeed sprawling with wealth and local clout. Bucolic oil paintings adorning the vaulted ceilings, ornate gold trim accenting every corner, towering floral centerpieces amidst white-clothed dining tables. Leon, smarmy as ever in his discount suit, was circulating near the bar area, already clutching a glass of scotch. I sneered in disgust as I watched him shrink away like a kicked dog any time a friend or acquaintance pulled him aside for conversation, no doubt afraid they had also heard the ugly rumors. When he spotted me enter the ballroom, his face visibly paled and he quickly tried to look away, pretending not to have seen me. Pathetic weakling. As the opening remarks and fundraising speeches dragged on, I gripped the file folder tightly under the table, anticipation and adrenaline coursing through me. My moment was rapidly approaching. Finally, the master of ceremonies took the podium to kick off the evening's live auction component. Midway through his introduction, I seized my opportunity. If I could have everyone's attention, please, I called out over the low murmuring of the crowd, striding up towards the stage with purpose. Leon's eyes went wide with panic, realizing too late what was happening. Jenna gave me an approving nod and wink from her table nearby. Sorry, folks, but before we bid on prizes tonight, I have an important matter to address, I announced clearly, unsmiling. It's about one of our longtime attending members here and a dark double life he's been living. A life absolutely riddled with lies, criminal deceit, and reprehensible sins against his own wife and child. The room immediately erupted into hushed murmurs and awkward shifting in seats. Leon shrank back in his chair, face reddening. I'm talking about you, Leon Mitchell, I proclaimed, leveling my gaze directly at him like a laser. Everything you've done to betray our family and everyone else who ever cared about you is finally going to be exposed for all to see. Heart-pounding, I held up the overstuffed manila file for all to see. In my hands, I hold every shred of ironclad proof documenting your degenerate gambling addiction, the trail of debt and financial ruin you've caused our household, and the myriad ways you've lied, cheated, and discredited me in an effort to escape the rightful consequences. I took a breath, then began reading excerpts from the dispassionate factual reports in a clear, unapologetic tone. Bank statements of Mr. Mitchell withdrawing over $12,000 at a time from ATMs located inside Riverside Grand Casino. Photos of Mr. Mitchell entering Belmark Downs Casino no less than 37 times over a span of 3 months. Receipts of payment for delinquent credit lines opened illegally by Mr. Mitchell, using his wife's name and social security number, totaling over $100,000 in fraud. Leon had his head in his hands, hunched over amid a chorus of shocked gasps and mutterings permeating the ballroom. By now, every eye was locked on the unbelievable spectacle unfolding before them. I summoned the full force of rage and disgust welling inside me. This man, a degenerate gambling addict without a single shred of honor or decency, has been conning and manipulating all of you for quite some time now, And rest assured, the disgusting truth I'm about to lay bare is merely the ugly tip of the iceberg. Taking a breath, I steadied myself. Then I detonated the thermonuclear truth bomb. Are you all aware, for instance, of the numerous racist and sexist tirades Leon is known for on his routine benders? And like that, the first bombshell landed. Chapter 8. Rebuilding. The days and weeks after that fateful gala passed by in a bit of a whirlwind. My public excoriation of Leon's sordid misdeeds and repugnant behavior had set off shockwaves reverberating across our community. Just as I had hoped, the sheer volume of cold, hard evidence I provided, combined with the respected social setting in which I delivered it, left Leon with zero credibility to try and deny or excuse what a depraved degenerate he had become. Friends and acquaintances who once embraced Leon suddenly wanted nothing to do with him. He was quickly fired from his corporate management job once my damning dossier made the rounds with leadership. Even some of his seedy gambling cohorts at the underground rooms wanted to distance themselves from the PR nightmare he had become. Watching Leon's life and reputation crumble in real time was immensely satisfying, a warranted obliteration after his myriad betrayals of trust. Seeing him finally face the disastrous consequences of his own disgusting choices provided a sense of karmic catharsis. It wasn't just social disgrace and pariah status he earned either. With the rock-solid proof I provided of his litany of financial crimes and domestic violations, law enforcement also fast-tracked charges against him on numerous fronts. One early morning a few weeks later, SWAT officers showed up pounding on his squalid apartment door to arrest him for outstanding warrants. The look of abject terror on Leon's face as they wrenched his arms behind his back and shoved him against the wall was priceless. For once, the sad sack realized there would be no more wiggling out of trouble or spinning sob stories to skirt accountability. He ultimately agreed to a plea deal, receiving a harsh 3-year sentence, during which time I have an ironclad permanent restraining order against him legally enforced. In exchange for his conviction, he was forced to liquidate every penny of his remaining assets, brokerage funds, and foreclosed properties to pay back the full $220,000 in marital assets he squandered gambling, plus interest and penalties. I even sued to ensure he kept paying out of his earned wages for the next decade until the debts were repaid to the last penny. Despite the exorbitant financial cost Leon was court-ordered to cover, it still didn't put much of a dent in my rapidly rebuilding savings and investment portfolio. Thanks to a surprisingly lucrative wrongful life lawsuit settlement my attorney managed to secure from one of the scuzzy casino operators Leon frequented most often, I once again had a healthy nest egg firmly in place for Lucy's future college plans and more. Speaking of Lucy, she had been my bedrock throughout this entire saga. While the legal maelstrom and social typhoon raged all around us, I made every effort to insulate my sweet girl from as much turmoil as possible. I didn't want the vicious karma reprisals of her father's sick misdeeds robbing her of the innocent childhood she deserved. There were undoubtedly some unavoidable disruptions and difficult conversations to navigate as the sordid truths about Leon's lies and betrayals kept unfolding. However, Lucy seemed to innately understand that her mommy was merely doing whatever was necessary to clean up an unhealthy situation, a messy but altruistic process ultimately intended to preserve and protect the family she held most dear. Each night as we cuddled up watching one of her favorite movies, feeling her small body snuggled warmly beside me, I would shudder in relief, knowing all my scorched earth efforts had ensured Lucy's physical and emotional sanctity remained completely intact. Leon would no longer be able to pollute her world ever again. And now the storm had finally passed. With fresh financial stability and a radiantly bright future ahead of us, I could turn my attention to constructive new endeavors. In particular, I felt called to devote myself to helping other families shattered by gambling addictions, just as the crisis center counselors had assisted me. Drawing from my own lived experiences of heartbreak, deception, and the catharsis of confronting those traumas head-on, I knew I could provide invaluable empathy and guidance for others struggling to extract themselves from similar toxic situations. And perhaps most importantly, I could instill the righteousness of relentless self-preservation that had empowered me to decimate Leon's wicked vices without hesitation or mercy. it would be the ultimate cosmic role reversal. Harnessing the hard-won forces of karma that had once devastated me, using them as a beacon of hope for others drowning in their own private hells. A new crusade fueled by the life lessons of ruthlessly burning my hubris to ashes and rising like a fiery phoenix from the smoldering remains. As I shared the first details of my vision with the executive director of the crisis center, the older woman smiled warmly and placed a hand over mine. "My dear, you have such a powerful story to share. The transformation from victimized wife to avenging angel of truth and moral fortitude," she said. "I believe you're going to end up inspiring countless people with your bravery and perseverance." They don't yet know the half of it, I thought to myself with a confident smirk. If the old me could survive the crucible of betrayal and still emerge triumphant through sheer force of will, then no injustice or familial wrong would ever intimidate me again. Bring on the world's sicknesses. I would show them all the true healing power of uncompromising justice. The first time I met Nolan's mother, she tried to poison me. That sentence alone should tell you the kind of storm I walked into the day we decided to visit. It was supposed to be a simple introduction. Me, Nolan, our newborn daughter Juno, and the in-laws. But with Nolan's vague warnings about his mother's manipulative streak, I came prepared. "We're so delighted to finally meet you, Alara. And little Juno, she's just precious," Corinne, Nolan's mother, cooed as we entered their lavish living room. Her smile was warm, but her eyes didn't quite match the sentiment. "Thank you, Corinne. We've been looking forward to this visit," I replied, balancing Juno on my hip. Nolan had that tight smile he reserved for uncomfortable situations, his hand finding mine and squeezing it gently. "Let me get you some of our special herbal tea, Alara. It's a family recipe, very rejuvenating," Corinne offered, disappearing into the kitchen before I could politely decline. Nolan leaned in, whispering, "Remember what I said about Mom, just be careful." I nodded, recalling our conversations about his mother's past behavior. The warnings were vague, but enough to put me on edge. When Corinne returned, handing me a steaming cup, her smile was a little too eager. "Here you go, dear. Drink up." Politeness dictated I at least pretend to sip, but caution won over. I had slipped a test strip into my purse for such an occasion, a precaution that now seemed eerily prescient. As Corinne and Nolan chatted, I dipped the strip into the tea when no one was looking. The change in color was immediate and damning. "Nolan," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline, "your mother just tried to poison me." The room fell silent, the words hanging in the air like a guillotine's blade. Nolan's face went from confusion to horror as he turned to Corinne. "Mom, what is this? Alara, are you sure?" "I'm certain," I said, showing him the test strip. Corinne's facade crumbled, replaced by a cold fury I hadn't seen before. "How dare you accuse me of such a thing in my own home?" Corinne's voice was sharp, her veneer of warmth gone. Nolan stood, positioning himself protectively in front of me and Juno. "Mom, explain, now. I don't have to explain myself to anyone." Corinne snapped, her demeanor that of someone cornered. "You bring this girl into my home, and she accuses me of poisoning her?" "Nolan, we should leave," I said quietly, feeling Juno stir in my arms. "Not without an explanation," Nolan insisted, though his voice betrayed his understanding that we were unlikely to get one. The confrontation escalated, Corinne vehemently denying any wrongdoing, while simultaneously revealing her disdain for me. It was clear this was more than a mere misunderstanding. It was a declaration of war. As we left, Nolan's silence was heavy with unspoken apologies and the weight of a reality he had hoped to avoid. We had walked into a trap, laid with a smile and a cup of tea. And as the door closed behind us, I knew this was just the beginning. The battle lines were drawn, not over a mere disagreement, but over the safety and well-being of our family. "I'm sorry, Alara. I should have listened to my own warnings more closely," Nolan finally said as we drove away, the distance from Corinne's house growing with each passing mile. "It's not your fault, Nolan. We knew she might be difficult, but we couldn't have anticipated this," I reassured him, though my mind raced with plans and contingencies. This wasn't just about surviving Corinne's manipulations. It was about protecting our daughter from the toxicity that lurked behind polite smiles and poisoned welcomes. And as the road stretched out before us, I knew one thing for certain. We were in this together, come what may. After the poisoned tea incident, the ride back home was a quiet storm. Juno, oblivious to the tension, cooed softly in her seat, a stark contrast to the turmoil between Nolan and me. As soon as we were home, Nolan went straight to the phone. I watched, holding Juno close, as he dialed his sister, Leah, someone he hadn't spoken to in years. "Leah, it's Nolan. We need to talk about Mom," he began, his voice betraying a mix of anger and desperation. The conversation was long and fraught with pauses filled with years of unsaid grievances. I could only catch Nolan's side, but it was enough to paint a picture of disbelief and realization. He hung up, looking drained but determined. Leah had her suspicions. She stopped drinking anything at Mom's years ago. Never thought. His voice trailed off, the weight of his family's dysfunction settling in. "We need to expose her, Nolan. For Juno's sake, we can't let her get away with this," I said, the urgency of our situation pressing down on me. Nolan nodded, a silent agreement to a path neither of us ever anticipated we'd take. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Nolan reached out to other family members, while I took to the internet, digging into forums and social media groups for anyone who might have had similar experiences with Corinne. The stories we found were chilling. Corinne had a history of manipulating situations to her advantage, often at the expense of others' well-being. There were tales of sabotaged relationships, career opportunities destroyed, and even hints at darker deeds. Each story added another piece to the puzzle of Corinne's true nature. One evening, as we sat at the kitchen table surrounded by notes and laptop screens, Nolan's Aunt Diane called. She had been estranged from the family for years, a fallout from her own confrontation with Corinne. "I heard what happened, Nolan. I'm sorry I didn't warn you sooner." Diane's voice was heavy with regret. "It's not your fault, Aunt Diane. We're just trying to figure out what to do next," Nolan replied, his tone weary. "I might have something that can help. After my falling out with Corinne, I started keeping records of her, let's call them discrepancies, dates, incidents, anything that seemed off. I thought it might be useful one day," Diane explained, her voice gaining strength. "Could we see them?" I asked, my interest piqued. "Of course. I'll send everything I have. It's time someone put an end to her reign," Diane said, the determination in her voice clear. The package arrived 2 days later, a thick envelope filled with notes, emails, and photographs. Diane's meticulous records provided a timeline of Corinne's manipulations, a damning collection of evidence that painted a horrifying picture of the woman who had tried to harm me. Nolan and I pored over the documents, realizing the scale of Corinne's deceit was far beyond what we had imagined. It wasn't just about us or Juno, it was about every person Corinne had ever wronged. "We need to go public with this," Nolan said, conviction in his voice. "We have to show everyone who she really is." I nodded in agreement. "And we'll need to be careful. She won't go down without a fight." The decision was made. With Diane's evidence and the stories we had gathered, we began to craft our strategy. Our aim was clear: to expose Corinne's manipulations and protect others from her toxic influence. The battle lines were drawn not just for our family's safety, but for the community's as well. Corinne had played her game for far too long, and it was time to end it. For Juno, for ourselves, and for every silent victim of Corinne's cruelty, the fight was just beginning. The days following our decision to expose Corinne were filled with clandestine meetings and whispered phone calls. Nolan and I had become detectives in our own right, piecing together the mosaic of Corinne's manipulations. But it wasn't just about gathering evidence anymore. It was about building alliances. One evening, Nolan received a call from his cousin Marcus, who had been on the fringes of the family drama for years. "I heard about what you're doing," Marcus said, his voice tinged with a mix of caution and intrigue, "and I want in." "Why now?" Nolan asked, skepticism clear in his tone. "Because I'm tired of watching from the sidelines. Aunt Corinne has done enough damage. It's time to stop her," Marcus replied, his resolve evident even through the phone. Marcus's involvement opened the floodgates. One by one, family members and old acquaintances began to reach out, each with their own story of how Corinne had wronged them. It was as if Nolan and I had lit a beacon, calling all those who had been harmed to come forward. Among them was a woman named Clara, who had been Corinne's assistant for years before a sudden and unexplained dismissal. I saw things, Clara confessed when we met in a quiet cafe, her eyes darting around as if Corinne might appear at any moment. Documents, emails, things that weren't right. I kept copies of everything, thinking it might come in handy someday. Clara's files were a treasure trove of information, detailing financial irregularities and covert manipulations that went beyond personal vendettas into the realm of the criminal. It was the kind of evidence that could not only discredit Corinne, but potentially lead to legal action against her. As the network of allies grew, so did our confidence. But it wasn't just about bringing Corinne down anymore. It was about healing the wounds she had inflicted. Each person who came forward shared not just their grievances, but their hopes for resolution and peace. The plan to expose Corinne began to take shape. We decided on a community meeting, but at a forum where those affected could speak openly about their experiences. The event would be advertised as a discussion on community wellness, a guise that would prevent Corinne from suspecting our true intentions until it was too late. The night before the meeting, Nolan and I sat with Juno between us, going over our final preparations. "Do you think we're ready?" I asked, seeking reassurance in Nolan's steady gaze. "We're as ready as we'll ever be," he replied, squeezing my hand. "We're doing this for the right reasons. For Juno, for the family, for everyone Corinne has ever hurt. No matter what happens, we're doing the right thing." The day of the meeting, the community center was buzzing with an undercurrent of tension and anticipation. As people began to fill the room, I recognized faces from our conversations, each one carrying a story of resilience and hope. When Corinne arrived, escorted by a few loyalists unaware of the evening's true purpose, the room fell into an uneasy silence. She took a seat at the front, her confidence unshaken, a smirk playing at the corner of her mouth as if she already knew she would emerge victorious. The meeting began with general discussions on community issues, but it wasn't long before the conversation turned, as planned, to the topic of manipulation and deceit within our own ranks. One by one, individuals stood up to share their stories, their voices steady but charged with emotion. With each testimony, Corinne's facade began to crack, her confident demeanor giving way to a growing realization of her impending downfall. As I stood to share our story, Nolan by my side, I looked out at the sea of faces before us. This was more than just a confrontation. It was a declaration of our collective strength against the tyranny of one. Tonight, we stand together not just to expose the deceit and manipulation that has plagued our community, I began, my voice echoing through the room, but to reclaim our dignity, our unity, and our hope for a better future. This is our moment of truth. The room erupted into applause, a sound that marked not the end, but the beginning of our journey toward healing and justice. The aftermath of the community meeting was a whirlwind of emotions and actions. Our collective voice had been heard, but the real battle, we knew, was just beginning. Corinne, cornered and furious, left the meeting with a stormy expression, promising retribution with her eyes. That night, Nolan and I sat in our living room, Juno asleep in her crib, preparing for the next phase of our plan. "We need to be careful," Nolan said, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through a barrage of messages on his phone. "She's going to come after us with everything she's got." I nodded, feeling the weight of our decision. "We need to be smarter. We've got the community behind us now. It's time to use that momentum." The following days were a test of our resolve. Corinne, true to form, began a smear campaign, attempting to discredit those who had spoken out against her. But the tide had turned. For every lie she spread, there was a counterwave of support for us and our allies. It was during this time that we learned of a town hall meeting scheduled to discuss the recent disturbances in the community. Corinne, despite the growing opposition, had managed to position herself as a mediator, seeking to heal the community she had so adeptly divided. "We can't let her control the narrative," I told Nolan. "This town hall is our chance to expose her publicly, with undeniable evidence." Nolan agreed, and we began gathering all the documentation, testimonies, and evidence we had accumulated. Marcus and Clara, among others, worked tirelessly with us, compiling a dossier that painted a comprehensive picture of Corinne's manipulations. The night before the town hall, our living room was a command center of activity. Maps of the community center were laid out, positions assigned, and every detail of our presentation rehearsed. Our plan was to confront Corinne with the evidence, demanding accountability in front of the entire community. "Are we ready for this?" Marcus asked, looking around the room at each of us. "We have to be," Nolan replied, his voice steady. "For everyone she's hurt, for our family, we have to see this through." The day of the town hall arrived with a palpable tension in the air. The community center was packed, a testament to the gravity of the situation. Corinne was already there, surrounded by a dwindling number of supporters, her confidence seemingly unshaken. As the meeting began, Corinne took the stage, her voice oozing faux concern for the community's unity and healing. But her speech was cut short when Nolan stood up, the dossier in his hands. "Enough, Corinne," he said, his voice echoing in the packed room. "It's time for the truth." The room fell silent as Nolan and I approached the stage, the evidence folder in hand. Corinne's face went pale, her mask of concern slipping as she realized what was about to happen. One by one, we presented the evidence, financial records, emails, testimonies from those she had wronged. With each piece of evidence, Corinne's facade crumbled, her attempts to interject and deny growing weaker. The community's response was immediate and supportive. As we laid bare Corinne's manipulations, there were gasps, murmurs of disbelief, and then, as we concluded, a standing ovation. It wasn't just a victory for us, but for the entire community, a collective sigh of relief and a step toward healing. Corinne, defeated and exposed, left the stage amidst a chorus of boos and shouts. The battle was won, but we knew the war was far from over. Still, standing there among our allies, feeling the support of the community around us, we knew we had turned a crucial corner. Together we had faced down a tyrant and emerged stronger, united by our shared struggle for justice and integrity. The days following the town hall were a mix of relief and vigilance. Corinne had been publicly exposed, her manipulations laid bare for all to see. Yet we knew the battle was far from over. Corinne was wounded, but not defeated, and her capacity for revenge was a well we knew ran deep. The community's support was overwhelming. People we barely knew came forward with offers of help and words of encouragement. It was as if Corinne's exposure had not just vindicated those she had wronged, but had also liberated a community from her grip of fear. Yet in the midst of this newfound unity, the question of what Corinne would do next lingered like a shadow. It wasn't long before we had our answer. 2 weeks after the town hall, Nolan received a legal notice. Corinne was suing us for defamation, a move as bold as it was desperate. The lawsuit was baseless, a fact clear to anyone who had witnessed her public downfall. But it was her message to us. She was not going down without a fight. "We'll fight this," Nolan said, his jaw set as he read over the notice again. "We have the truth on our side. And we have the community," I added, feeling a surge of determination. This lawsuit was not just an attack on us, but on everyone who had stood up to Corinne. The legal battle that ensued was grueling. Corinne's tactics were as underhanded in the courtroom as they had been in her personal dealings. But for every move she made, we countered with the solid foundation of truth and evidence we had built. During this time, our allies proved invaluable. Testimonies from those Corinne had wronged painted a damning picture of her character and actions. Clara's documentation became a cornerstone of our defense, her meticulous records irrefutable in the face of Corinne's lies. The turning point came when Marcus took the stand. He recounted not just his personal experiences with Corinne, but also revealed a series of emails that exposed her attempts to manipulate the lawsuit in her favor. The courtroom was silent as the gravity of his testimony sank in, the evidence of her malice clear and undeniable. In the end, the judge dismissed Corinne's lawsuit, citing overwhelming evidence of her misconduct. The victory was more than legal. It was moral, a vindication of our fight for justice. But our celebration was short-lived. Within days of the lawsuit's dismissal, Corinne's house was put up for sale. Rumors swirled that she was leaving town, her reputation in ruins, and her power over the community shattered. The news of her departure was met with a mix of relief and reflection. The harm she had caused was deep, but so was the resilience she had unknowingly fostered among those she had sought to control. On the day of Corinne's departure, the community organized a gathering, not to celebrate her leaving, but to affirm the unity and strength we had discovered in ourselves. It was a moment of closure, a chance to look forward to a future free from her influence. As Nolan and I stood among our friends and neighbors, I realized the true extent of what we had achieved. We had not just exposed one woman's deceit. We had reclaimed our community, our sense of trust, and our hope for a better tomorrow. Our fight was never just about Corinne, Nolan said, his voice filled with emotion as he addressed the gathering. It was about all of us, about standing up for what's right and protecting each other. We've shown that, together, we can overcome even the darkest of manipulations. The applause that followed was not just for Nolan's words, but for the journey we had all undertaken. As I looked around at the faces in the crowd, I saw not just the end of Corinne's reign, but the beginning of something new and hopeful. In the end, Corinne's attempt to destroy us had only made us stronger, a testament to the power of unity and the indomitable spirit of a community that refused to be broken. Corinne's departure from the community marked a turning point, but not an end to our troubles. The peace we had fought so hard to achieve was fragile, and we soon learned that Corinne's influence reached further than we had imagined. A month had passed since the lawsuit was dismissed when the first signs of Corinne's retaliation emerged. It started subtly, a whisper campaign aimed at undermining the businesses of those who had stood against her. Then, more overtly, legal challenges began to surface against community projects we knew Corinne had once opposed. "It's her," Nolan said one evening, frustration evident in his voice as he looked over a series of legal notices that had been delivered to various community members. "She's behind this, I'm sure of it." The realization that Corinne was still orchestrating attacks from afar was a bitter pill to swallow. Our initial victory felt suddenly hollow, overshadowed by the ongoing battles we faced. But surrender was not in our nature. "We beat her once, we'll do it again," I declared, my resolve hardening. This was not just about defending our victories, but protecting the very fabric of our community. Our first step was to trace the legal challenges back to their source. With the help of Clara, who had become our unofficial investigator, we discovered a pattern. All the challenges were being funded through a web of shell companies, but the strategy bore the unmistakable hallmark of Corinne's manipulation. Armed with this information, we organized a community meeting, much like the one that had marked the beginning of our fight against Corinne. The turnout was massive, a testament to the solidarity that had grown among us. "We're facing a new kind of challenge," Nolan addressed the crowd, his voice steady and strong. "But we're not just a community, we're a family, and we protect our own." The meeting was a rallying point, a collective commitment to stand against Corinne's shadowy attempts to disrupt our lives. Legal defense funds were set up, and a network of support for affected businesses was established. We were more than just neighbors, we were allies in a shared struggle. But Corinne's retaliation took a more personal turn when rumors began to circulate about Nolan and me. Lies about our marriage, our finances, even our fitness as parents were spread, each more malicious than the last. It was an attack designed to isolate us, to erode the support we had worked so hard to build. But Corinne had underestimated the strength of the bonds within our community. Instead of turning away, our friends and neighbors rallied around us, offering their support and denouncing the rumors for what they were, baseless attempts to harm us. One evening, as we sat with a group of our closest allies, planning our next steps, Leah, Nolan's sister, spoke up. "She's trying to break us apart, but she's only making us stronger. We need to show her that her tactics won't work. Not here." Leah was right. Our response to Corinne's attacks needed to be more than just defensive. We needed to reclaim the narrative, to show that we were united in the face of her attempts to divide us. In the weeks that followed, we launched a series of community initiatives aimed at strengthening our bonds and supporting those who had been targeted by Corinne's actions. Fundraisers, community service projects, and public forums turned her attempts to sow discord into opportunities for unity and growth. As we worked to counteract Corinne's influence, I realized that this fight was not just about defeating an adversary. It was about affirming our values, about building a community where manipulation and deceit had no place. The battle was far from over, but with each step we took together, we were sending a clear message. We were stronger than Corinne's malice, and we would not be broken. The escalation of Corinne's attacks brought us to a crucial juncture. It was clear that simply defending against her maneuvers was not enough. We needed to take decisive action to end her influence once and for all. The challenge was formidable, but the stakes, our family's well-being, and the harmony of our community were too high to ignore. Nolan and I, alongside our closest allies, gathered one evening to strategize our next move. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of determination and the weight of the task ahead. "We need to find her Achilles' heel," Nolan said, breaking the silence. "There has to be something we can use to stop her for good." The room buzzed with suggestions, but it was Clara who brought the breakthrough. "What about the shell companies? If we can prove she's behind them, it could be enough to bring legal action against her." Her suggestion sparked a flurry of activity. We divided tasks, some of us digging deeper into the financial trails, while others reached out to legal experts to understand our options. The breakthrough came sooner than we expected. A mistake in the paperwork of one of the shell companies provided the link we needed to tie Corinne directly to the legal challenges being mounted against the community. With this evidence in hand, we approached the authorities. The process was painstaking, requiring every ounce of patience and resilience we had. But as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that we were on the verge of a significant victory. Then, the day we had been working towards arrived. The authorities confirmed that they had enough evidence to charge Corinne with financial misconduct and using her resources to maliciously target individuals and businesses. The news spread through the community like wildfire. For many, it was a moment of profound relief and vindication. For Nolan and me, it was a confirmation that our fight, though fraught with challenges, had been worth it. But our moment of triumph was tempered by the knowledge that the battle had taken its toll. We had seen firsthand the depths of Corinne's malice and the lengths she would go to maintain her control. It was a sobering reminder of the damage that one person's vendetta could inflict on so many lives. In the days that followed, as the legal proceedings against Corinne began to unfold, the community came together in a show of solidarity that was unlike anything we had experienced before. It was as if Corinne's downfall had not just removed a malignant force from our lives, but had also served as a catalyst for a newfound sense of unity and purpose. "We did it," Nolan said to me one evening as we sat on our porch watching the sunset. "It's finally over." I nodded, feeling a mix of exhaustion and elation. "We did," I agreed. "But we didn't do it alone. It was all of us, together." The battle against Corinne had tested us in ways we could never have anticipated. It had brought to light the darkest aspects of human nature, but had also illuminated the strength that could be found in community and collective action. As we looked towards the future, it was clear that our community would never be the same. We had been through the fire, but instead of being consumed by it, we had emerged stronger, more connected, and more committed to protecting the values that had united us in the face of adversity. Corinne's legacy, we decided, would not be one of fear and division, but a reminder of the power of resilience, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the unbreakable bond of a community that refuses to be broken.